Okay, all right. Let's call it to order. Approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Good. A second.
I'll second.
Some movement a little, but anyway, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approval of the minutes from the February 1st meeting. Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
No caller.
Sorry.
Anybody
Me.
see any changes or anything? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public comment. We do have some public people here. Are you here? For the public hearings, are you not?
Yes.
You're here for the public hearing, all right. Okay. We don't have Jay, nobody else is here. Supervisor. Let's see, so the update on the trail is.
Yep, Bob should be online for
Bob
that.
online?
Yep, the land and water report, Eric is not here today for that.
Oh,
And that if you guys have questions in that, it sounds like Bob can try to field some of them today. Otherwise, if you want a more formal presentation from land and water, you could wait until the March 1st meeting. So.
sure, we didn't read it. I didn't see a lot of questions, I don't know. Unless people have questions. No, I didn't have any reason, all right.
Do you want to let him present it at March?
We probably got to present it if he wants. So Bob just goes through the update.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, we've got plenty of time, so you can drag it out a little.
Well, I'll try. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, we'll start with the comprehensive trail network plan. In your packet is the updated report. There is one correction, however. Within the ATV UTV project, the intensive park project, our consultant, SEH, will present the 100% final design at your subsequent meeting. So on March 1st, SEH will be here to present to the committee. Initially, we were going to present the full county board, but Mo and I felt that we would get a lot of good input from this committee. And so we'll still present the county board, but that'll just be Mo and I. However, again, on the 1st of March, SEH will be here to present that final design. We got the 100% design yesterday. In fact, we received it. So we have roughly 8 or 9 days to do a staff review. And then we're meeting with SEH on the 23rd of February to provide some final impact or input rather. And by the way, I've already placed that 100% design in the ESC packet for March 1st. So look for that. It's basically the site plans or the plan sets. And I'll probably put the budget in there. The budget's much, much lower. And that's a product of staff sitting down together and staff. What I mean by when I refer to staff, and it's Rod, Polk, Mo, Mike Minke, Forrester, Brent Cisco, and myself. Basically, we've lowered the cost for fencing. We still think fencing is a good idea, particularly on the southern border and on the eastern border and at the southwest corner. So we're going to go with T-posts. It's not going to be like chain link fence 6 feet high all the way around. It's much more lower scale. We also reduced the trail width to 10 feet wide and added some additional gates. And in fact, once we get your endorsements and probably at least talking to the Parks Department, they might start clearing and grubbing later this year, like in the fall of 2023. And back to the fence issue, tomorrow night, our county forester, Brent Cisco, and I are going to the town of Sterling. We're on their agenda. We're going to collect input from the town regarding this project. And as you may know, to the east of that 60 acres is a town lot. Also, to the southeast there is the existing 6-mile loop. So we want to punch in a little artery or connection from the 6-mile loop to the corner of the ATV intensive park. However, that goes through a town lot. So I want to have that conversation with the board, and also maybe start talking about an MOU between the county and town regarding all these new trails. As you know, the new Jack Pine Trail, roughly a third of that trail is through town land. And so it might be a good practice to start that conversation about, maintenance and securing that access into the future with the town. So, and I think also tomorrow at the town board meeting, I'm going to offer some assistance for the comp plan because, as you all know, June, April 1st, they'll be under county zoning authority. And, you need a comprehensive land use plan to align with your land use decision. So I know they're struggling a little bit, but I think we're going to offer some assistance for the town. Just transitioning into the Gandy Dancer feasibility study. We have begun the outreach to all the municipalities in which the trail intersects. In fact, as early as next week, we're meeting with some of the municipalities. We're going to do that throughout the month of March. Earlier this month, on the 8th, we had another meeting with the DNR. This time included the Ice Age Trail Alliance, the National Park Service, was facilitated by the DNR. We gathered some information about those stakeholder groups' concerns. I anticipate a position statement forthcoming from both the National Park Service. We already have one from the Ice Age Trail, and I'll share those as they come. And we might be getting a written position paper from the Friends of the Gandy as well. In terms of our process for that, as you all know, we've already done interviews with the user group. We are looking at some additional alternatives. I'll say there's 4 options that they delivered last month. According to the project schedule, SRF, which is the consultant, and I will present to environmental services on those additional alternatives in either April, probably in April. And if we stay on task, the final presentation will be in front of county board either in May or in June. Mike Minke, our Parks and Trails coordinator, reported that the candlelight walk was a success. Basically, for 8 hours, the Star was closed with barricades. That was a nice day. So Mike reported roughly between 70 or 90 snowmobilers were rerouted away from the Stour and from County C to Harriman there. The rec officer was present and the Snowmobile Council partnered with the Parks Department to ensure that event was, that's an annual event, as you all know. To ensure that that event was a success. The signage plan, we built all these new trails and recreational assets. Claire, as well as Brad, have been working on the kiosk design, and it's nearly complete. Claire's done the layout and text, and Brad's updated the maps. So we're gonna have some final proof forthcoming, and then Parks and Trails will build the kiosks, and we'll probably farm out the actual signage to be placed on those kiosks. That's about it. As Jason mentioned, the Land and Water annual report is in the packet. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you have any questions regarding that. But back to the Comprehensive Trail Network Plan or any Parks and Trails initiatives, if you have any questions.
I didn't have any questions. Does anybody? You kind of covered it pretty well. The SRF and stuff in that one. There's SEH, are they the ones, they're doing that loop? They're gonna do that one too, to the full board?
No, Cam, that's a good question. That's what I mentioned earlier. They're gonna come just to the committee in their scope of work. They are only asked to deliver one formal presentation, and they have some flexibility there, either a county board or this committee, your committee. And I think Mo and I think we get more value at presenting the final environmental services, because there's still be an opportunity to provide input there from you all, since you've been part of the project from day one, and then from there on, because most of this work's going to be done in-house. I mean, so they are preparing some bidding documents for us, but most of the, at least the clearing and grubbing, is going to be done through our Parks Department. A lot of the materials, like the obstacles that'll be buried, like the big bonfires and telephone poles and trap rock, create that experience. We have on hand, so that's going to reduce the cost as well. And then we plan to apply for a DNR grant to subsidize that project this spring. So just to answer your question, no. March 1st, which is the next meeting, SCH will present to this committee, and then
Okay,
thereafter we'll go to county board.
sure. All right. What else? Any questions on any of that or the Land and Water?
No, I'm good.
Nope. All right. Let's jump to number 9. We've got 15 minutes. You can't drag it out that long. We can always take a break before that. But we might as well go through, so we don't need a closed session either.
My recommendation is that we don't need a closed session. I can give you a brief update if
Yep.
that's what everyone wants. And then if anyone has a question, we can then jump into closed session.
Yeah.
So Malia had the hearing where argument was made on the county's motion to dismiss the action from Blue Rock Quarry. Malia made her argument, the Blue Rock Quarry attorney made their argument, and then Malia made a response. The judge at that point said that he would be taking it into consideration. A lot of cases were referenced by both parties that he, I think, said he hadn't quite read yet. So he was going to read those cases and then either schedule it for an oral ruling or he'll issue a written ruling. It's expected that if the judge is going to do an oral ruling, that will probably get scheduled next week or so. The hearing won't get scheduled, but the scheduling will occur next week or so. Schedule stuff that gets scheduled out. So out. So if it's written, it'll probably be the same amount of time because the judge is likely to, just read what he has already written down. So I would expect some kind of result within a month, maybe two. But that's really the only progress that's happened. The judge hasn't asked for any additional filings or any additional argument to be made. So for now, we wait.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I just have one question. It's not a technical, I mean, it's a technical one. When the judge makes that ruling, or when they schedule then another hearing and it comes up in court to read it or.
So it depends. If he only does a written ruling, our motion is to dismiss the case. So if the judge dismisses the case, then the case ends and there would be nothing else to get scheduled. If he doesn't, if he says, no, your motion to dismiss is denied, then it would get scheduled for further proceedings.
Then it proceeds on. Yeah, okay.
you don't have questions, we don't have to go to close because then it's pretty much the same. All right, let's leave it at that. All right. So we've got all our others, so we have to wait till 9:30. We might as well break till about.
Might just say,
Oh, go ahead.
we can break, but don't break to the restroom here in this building because I apologize.
Yeah, there's
that
no
we're
break, yeah.
Fixing the
There's no rest.
sewage.
Well, we might as well just take a short break and that way. Jason, your stuff was just, you just got it today, yesterday,
Last night
last
or
night.
today, yep.
5:27.
So the DNR comments came at 5:27 last night, and then the other comments was with Supervisor Olson because he wasn't able to attend today. So,
Okay,
yep.
all right.
They're denied. Brad's are denied.
And the last page there, that was Supervisor Whoop. And that was his comments. I thought he was gonna be here, but maybe he had problems coming
We
in
had some
too.
questions
So,
about this part of that.
okay, Whoop, yeah.
Yeah.
Whoop, no, Whoop. So,
All right, we can sit and read these and do that, we just, we'll have to wait till 9:30 to do the public hearing.
Yeah.
Is that your cue?
You got your
bunch of stuff.
your trail update was good.
Yeah.
When do you have another contract? Until April, okay. Then we put you on our list.
Yeah.
For an update.
So I'll give you an update probably next month. I'll talk about on the meeting we had at the end of January, just the last week. The week before.
All right.
Sure.
Is Dan still on that?
Or- No, yes, he is.
Oh, tell him hi for me.
I'll do. Yes.
so Lemir's came in and then yesterday morning.
So you paid him. this way.
What's it?
Did you
Yeah,
pay
I was out there and then losing track of everything at night.
Right. So we have, everybody else is basically on the renewable energy. Let's do Stefan's here and move forward there.
Right, you ready to open it up, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, let's read that one in.
Okay. John M. Stephan Estate request a rezone from residential Ag 5 to residential for a parcel located at 2508 75th Avenue, located in section 26, town 33 north, range 19 west, in the town of Osceola. The parcel number is 042-01177-0000. The parcel consists of 6.45 acres. With that, and that the county did publish a class 2 legal notice prior to this hearing, which involved putting it in the paper for 2 weeks prior and also notifying all the adjoining property owners and town and that within, and that the last 2 weeks. So it was published on the 1st and the 8th. We have not received any letters of objection to this rezone request. Our only exhibit is the town of Osceola's meeting minutes from their February 6th, 2023 meeting. And I'll just read you the small portion of their minutes regarding this rezone. Property owner Jim Steffen at 2508 75th Avenue would like to change the zoning of parcel number 0420011770000 from RA5 to R1. And that an application and survey maps were provided to the Plan Commission at the Plan Commission's January 24th, 2023 meeting. And the Plan Commission recommended that the town board approve the rezoning from RA5 to R1 for that parcel. Carl Hetfield, the surveyor, and Jim Steffen, property executor, attended the board meeting and were there to answer any questions. Motion was made by Wind, seconded by Chronic to approve changing the zoning on the parcel number 04201177000 to R1. Motion carried. With that, Claire's got the map up here. And so we're right outside of the village of Osceola. The parcel is 6.4 acres. The current access is coming off from 75th Avenue or County Road M there, up by that driveway point. I can't quite reach it. There we go. And there's the house, which is right here, and their well, and their septic. They're proposing to split this parcel right across here. That's the reason for the rezone. There is an old shed there. I believe the old trailer house has been removed. There is no wetlands, floodplain, or other navigable waters on the property. This area here is a large wetland complex over here, but none of that goes over onto their property according to the DNR maps. The property is kind of sandwiched between the golf course development over here. There's also a major plat for homes here, and then of course to the west. So it is kind of right in a normal single family housing development area. Because of that, it does comply with, the surrounding land use and the existing land use in the area. There is an issue, not that it's relevant to the zoning change, the map, but with this strip here, that parcel right in the corner there, that's 2 acres, that's a cemetery. And there's some meets and bounds description errors, and that for this little strip here. So there will be a quiet title action pursued as part of the surveying, and that to clarify that ownership. So it's a very narrow strip. So in other words, what's being proposed is actually a 3-lot CSM, 2 normal lots and 1 outlot, because they want to do a quiet title action on the outlot to clarify the ownership of it. So in other words, the plat and the cemetery descriptions don't match. So that's what it is.
And that would be the egress ingress to that second lot to the south.
It is, yep, correct. So yeah, it's gonna have access. So that's what I've got for a staff report.
Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Any questions, Eddie?
No, I think you just answered mine.
Yeah, that was the only question I had too was,
Claire, can you pull up that document then and out of my folder. Stefan, staff report should be called. Okay, so basically everything I just went through is what I've got here for findings of fact. And then for the conclusions of law and that the zoning change to R1 complies with the town of Osceola's comprehensive plan. Most of the surrounding lots are used for residential purposes. So the rezoning complies with the comprehensive plan, existing surrounding land use, and it's not going to have a negative impact on the infrastructure and that going through that area with the accesses the way they have. So with that, we would recommend approval of the rezone from RA5 to R1.
On this one that we can move on, I think. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Any questions? Hearing none, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that one's good to go. Now, to open it up on the. We gonna open up this for all of these, or do we want to start? I think we want to start with the small wind, don't we?
Okay.
Or the small energy.
We can do that.
Should we start with that? Should we just take each one separate?
Yep, we need to
In case
do
we have
each
to
one
move it if
separate.
Something happens.
Yep.
Okay. Let's start there then, because that's where I guess most of the controversy is at.
Okay. First of all, Mr. Chair, I'd like to take and start off by saying that I filed a petition to amend these ordinances with the county clerk on January 19th, 2023. The county did provide a class 2 legal notice and that to the newspaper. And we also provided certified mail notices to each town board. And that paper was published on February 1st and February 8th. And so that applies to all the ordinances. With that, I'll just get in.
Just to clarify, what to each board, because even the on zone, the county zoning, this one would apply.
In that,
So it went
yes,
to all of them.
I went to every town clerk certified mail.
Okay.
Yep, a copy of the
Yeah,
notice.
just so that we
Yep.
know that it went to all of them, either, even if they're not under county zoning. All right.
Yep. Okay, so the renewable energy ordinance, and that's proposed, was drafted at your guys' direction. There's no approvals needed from the DNR or Department of Ag or DSPS like some of our other ordinances require. If a town has more restrictive provisions than what is proposed in the current county ordinance, if this is enacted, and that the more restrictive provisions at the town level would be what would apply to it. This ordinance does apply to all the unincorporated areas of the county. So that would be very similar to like the county's Polk ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and even like our floodplain ordinance. The draft as it's drafted defines what is commercial use versus like a private use. And so a commercial use is defined as a use where the power generation is not accessory to the primary use of the property. It is the primary use of the property. So in other words, the power that's being generated on site is more than what's being used by the buildings or with the activity that's happening on the property. So there's power going back onto the power grid. That is the intent of that system. And that versus a private use in that, while you're going to be putting, power back on the grid, and then you'll be pulling off from the grid, it balances out to be fairly equal as far as the use, and the intent is just to supply the buildings and the use that's going on that property. So that's what private is. With that, and that there is two different kinds of permits, and that the commercial use is drafted to require a conditional use permit versus a private use is drafted to only require an administrative permit. So you walk into our office, apply for a permit, and that you'd be able to put up your private system to supply your house or home. In the ordinance too, and that it was directly drafted from the relative statutes and administrative code. But there was provisions drafted for noise, shadow flicker, signal interference, stray voltage, decommissioning, and of course setbacks. There's also provisions in there and that for emergency responder training. As you guys seen in the packet, I believe it was at your last meeting or 2 meetings ago, the Apple River Solar Project, had a fairly large battery backup expansion area. So stuff like that then would train our local EMS and that on how to respond if there was a spill, So those provisions are in there. basically the summary of what's being done. The county currently only has a small wind energy ordinance, and that we've had it. And that for a long time. The last time it was amended was in 2018. And so this provision or this ordinance would be to remove that, just because otherwise we would have duplicate language in the small wind as what we would have in like a solar or a large wind ordinance. So that's the only reason to repeal the small wind and try to get into one document. And because of that, a lot of the general provisions in the proposed draft then apply to all three types of systems. So
This was a model ordinance that we used to go by.
and that, so it was using and that surrounding counties ordinances, and that Cork County's got one. And then also using, and that the breakup that was provided by UW Extension. Extension has been working on model ordinances, and they're the ones that came up with the small scale size, mid scale, and then large scale size. Large scale size, and that still would go to the PSC for approval. And so in other words, our ordinance would apply from anything from 0 up into 100 megawatts. So of power generation.
All right, any questions of Jason? Get some input. Who wants to go first? State, come on up to the podium, state your name.
My name is Heather Gerber. I'm currently the finance manager at Polk Electric Cooperative. I'm also the project manager on a 2 megawatt solar project that we have been working on with One Energy Renewables for nearly 2 years. That's set to go into the town of Georgetown. A power purchase agreement has been signed between us and One Energy, meaning they'll actually be the owners of it and we'll buy the power off of it. And physical construction of the project is slated to begin as soon as weather permits, and it's expected to be operational by November 23. So the immediate concern that we have is that with the proposed ordinance is the impact it potentially imposes on the project. It's entering its final stages, which is that of construction. One Energy Renewables received confirmation from the Polk County Zoning Administrator in January 22 that the selected site required no permits. From that assurance, binding contracts were executed, the site was designed and material purchased, and a contractor selected. As of this week, the collective amount spent between One Energy and Polk Electric is $575,000 in over 600 hours of staff time. The process to actually get to the construction phase is lengthy. Requirements to follow this proposed ordinance will extend the completion date of the project, add unanticipated costs, and there's a risk that a permit may not be issued. I guess had the ordinance been in place at the inception of the project, steps to comply with it would have been addressed before material was purchased. So again, the initial stages of the project included due diligence in researching whether or not a project could go at the selected site. And we believe with the amount of time and money expended that it qualifies as substantial completion of the project, and as such should be exempted from this ordinance should it be passed.
Let's get through a few of these right now. All right.
Mr. Chair, can I just add a clarifying point?
Yes.
And that, so, and I failed to mention this earlier, and that Heather also had a letter that she had submitted to us, and that as an exhibit for this hearing. And that was exhibit 3 that I had sent out to the committee yesterday. And also as part of that exhibit package that you received was exhibit 1, and that which Steve had sent out to us. And then we've also got exhibit 2, which is from Eric Udelhoffen with One Energy. And then exhibit 4 was the July Polk newsletter. So those are the 4 exhibits that I provided you, just so that you can kind of line them up. So, okay.
And just Heather's got one letter that we'd like to enter here. It's really just reiterating what we've sent, and it's just a formal request to the committee to this, either get an exemption or put it on the agenda at the earliest time. Or the Heather's.
So this. you said
Exhibit 5, yep.
So did you say they have the One Energy letter from Eric? Rudelhoff?
Yep, that's
Okay.
exhibit 2.
Okay,
And then exhibit 1 was your first email that you had emailed to
Bob.
Bob. Yep. And then your newsletter is exhibit 4.
Whoa, just a second. There's a pen. There's more than one here.
yeah, it's one copy, it's a letter, and then it's exhibits. And it's
But it's a
exhibit.
letter and then this is all one?
This is all, it's all one document going to the committee asking for the exemption. It's really summarizing the previous 2 letters sent from Eric and Heather to the committee that was entered as testimony. This is a request to the committee
Well, we'll have
to put this onto the agenda.
We'll read this at the end here or something. Let's see.
And-
There's
and-
one that's quite a bit.
And I can read it if you want me to read that into the record too.
We can do that too. But let's go through
Sure.
what you have proposed first.
All right, my name is Steve Stroshane. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in electrical engineering. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Wisconsin. Currently, I'm the general manager of Polk Electric Cooperative. I've been employed at the electric cooperative for 26 years, and prior to that, worked as a consulting company, consulting to electric cooperatives for 4 years. So I've been working in the utility industry for 30 years now. For those that don't know, Polk Burnett serves 21,000 electric accounts in Polk, Burnett, St. Croix, Washburn, Barron, and Dunn counties. Polk County is probably the greatest density of accounts. We have almost 3,500 miles of electric distribution line through that service territory, and there's actually probably 3 utilities, Excel and Northwestern, that also serve Polk County, maybe a little bit of Barron Electric Cooperative. But today we operate a 1.25 megawatt solar array on our property in Centuria, from which we purchase 20% of the output, and our power supplier purchases the other 80%. This array has been in operation since November of 2017, so we've got some experience with solar arrays. Polk Burnett is also in the process, as Ms. Gerber stated, working with the developer on a second array in the town of Georgetown. We've signed that purchase power agreement, so you'll hear me testify PPA. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that stands for, but that's purchase power agreement. We've signed that with One Energy, and they've contracted with the landowner, and we're jointly in the process to bring that array into commercial operation in November of 23. And as you'll see in your packet, that was announced in our newsletter in July of 22. So in addition, I'd like to comment, I've been on your side of the table, worked in town of Osceola municipal government in different roles, from plan commission to board supervisor to board chair, for the 10 years total of all those roles. I've written a similar type of regulatory ordinance. So I know what you're trying to accomplish. I've read this ordinance. I've watched the video from the January 4th Environmental Services Committee meeting. And, I think a lot of what you are proposing is acceptable, but it seems very duplicated existing what the industry is already doing today. But I do disagree with some sections that I'm gonna make comments to. My general concern is the additional regulation. It all has a cost. And like I said, it's duplicated, and the cost is really apparent when you get into the small local solar. And I know you've seen a 100 megawatt project in front of your committee before, and what the impacts that has and the impacts a 10-acre array has are drastically different. And some of the regulations in here and the cost is going to be impacting them differently. So a lot of my focus today is really going to be talking about size and scales of how these regulations relate. I would just want to start it off with a little industry terminology. Does megawatt is referenced in this policy a lot? Does everyone know what a megawatt is? No? Yes. So I mean, if you add up all the solar panels, it's it's the power output of the solar panels. If you add up all the solar panels in an array, you're gonna add those up and it's gonna come up to some wattage. And in this case, your ordinance talks about megawatts. I'm gonna talk about substations. So a substation transforms the power, transforms the voltage either up or down. There's a difference between, you're talking again, big scale in your arrays. So there's a difference between the small arrays and large arrays, how they connect into the electric system. So one way to connect them is through the distribution system. So that's from these substations, which I think you have one in Balsam Lake serving the government center. So that's that line operates at 7,200 volts. Transmission operates from generating plants to the substations. That operates at 69,000 volts or 161,000 volts. So a 100 megawatt array is not connecting into the lines, serving the local town here at 7,000 volts. It's connecting into at 161,000 volts. So you'll see how this ties in as I get through my testimony. And then last thing, an inverter transforms DC power into AC power. DC power is like a battery. AC power is the power out of the wall outlet. So I'll reference those as I go through the testimony. So my first comment is really just talking about how it's organized, where you've got wind and solar, and I heard what was said here just now of why it's combined into one, so you don't have duplication, but it does. I think the two different generation sources, wind and solar, have different impacts and different requirements, and by combining them all into one ordinance, you're applying maybe some higher standards that you have concerns about over wind, applying those to solar, in my case, small scale solar. The intent is really, as I read the start of your ordinance, it's really to, the purpose is overseeing permitting wind and solar energy systems and preserving, protecting public health, safety without significantly increasing the cost. So, I mean, right away, when you start talking about public health and safety, I mean, have you heard concerns that is a reason to create an ordinance? I mean, I'm reading industry literature every day and I don't really hear much on, I don't see anything on solar fires. I had to Google search it and the stuff I came up with was from 10 years ago where some commercial rooftop solar had issues. So I'm not saying you can't have fires at a solar plant, but I just haven't heard of it, haven't read it, but that's right in your initial purpose, to protect public health and safety. So I'm just wondering if that was a concern of the committee, that there's solar fires. There just aren't a lot of, when you talk about solar, there just aren't a lot of moving parts to go wrong. And I'll cover a little bit more of that later, but I do anticipate, again, when you talk about without significantly increasing the cost, when you start talking small scale solar, this ordinance will significantly increase the cost of smaller solar. I can't speak for the larger solar. Yeah, as we get into the definitions, then that's probably my next point. Commercial, I just want you to be aware of some stuff going on down at the Public Service Commission. I know you want to exempt rooftop solar from being under this ordinance, other than requiring just a land use permit and some other pretty minor stuff. But there is some cases down at the Public Service Commission talking about third-party solar, which means essentially the homeowner leases out their roof of their building to a developer, and that developer takes the upfront cost of the solar panels, installs the panels on a roof. They own the panels. They sell the output to the homeowner then, and any excess goes back on to the electric grid. So there is some regulation will probably end up in litigation, but some decisions by the Public Service Commission say that is going to, has the potential to allow a commercial entity to put rooftop solar on, and it'll be in that commercial entity's name, not the homeowner's name, as is typically done today. One thing I missed when I started talking up front about wind and solar, just so you know, Polk Burnett has about 161 private renewable generation systems today. Of that, 158 are solar and only 3 are wind. And of the wind units, I think only 2 of them are really, or 1 of them is operating today. So a lot of I'm not sure Polk County is really a good wind resource. I can't say you'll never see wind here, but you can just tell from what's going on at the small scale that solar is more popular. Continue on into the definitions, and this is probably one of my big points here that I've already started on is small scale. 0 to 30 megawatts is a pretty big range. So trying to explain what 30 megawatts is today. If you look at all the hours in 2022, Polk Burnett's entire system, and we were probably the 2nd biggest cooperative in the state. Our entire system load was less than 30 megawatts for 54% of the hours of 2022. So I don't consider 30 megawatts small at all. I'd like to see small be 0 to 5 and then some other range from 5 and above. If you looked at just our Polk County load, 30 megawatts would probably cover Polk Burnett's Polk County load for the entire year. So I don't see that small. I would like to see some other, in the perfect ordinance, I'd see small 0 to 5, and then I'd see some differentiation in between the regulations. And that's my other point. So you've got large scale, you got mid scale, you got small scale. Mid scale goes from 30 to 100. Small is 0 to 30, mid is 30 to 100, and 100 and above is large. When you look at all your rules in the ordinances though, or in the ordinance, there's no differentiation. So the rules for a 90 megawatt unit are the same for a 1 megawatt unit. The only really difference I saw when I looked at this is under the conditional use permit requirements, only small and mid require conditional use permit. Anything large and above doesn't, but that was the only differentiation when I saw the rules of what applies. So I'm not saying I didn't miss anything in there, but when I read it, I didn't see any differentiation in the rules for the different sizes. And this next point isn't really a complaint. It's just something to be aware of when you reference megawatts in an ordinance or just megawatts in general. There's a difference between there's the megawatts on the DC side where the solar panels are. And then there's a megawatt on the AC side, the power that's actually output, because there's going to be more DC megawatts because there's losses as the panels degrade over time and it gets converted from DC to AC. So there's losses. So maybe some terminology up front saying megawatts referenced into this ordinance, I'll refer to AC megawatts. Going down into the general provisions then, this would be section 42-792 parentheses B. The owner shall provide annual trading to the county's emergency management department, sheriff's office, and fire, police, first responders identified in the owner's emergency plans. The owner shall provide at least 8 hours of training during each calendar year, and the owner is responsible for all direct training costs. So 2 points here. First of all, I don't know the definition of direct training costs. Is that the developer providing a trainer for the EMS people, or is that all the EMS labor time? So I wasn't sure as I read this if what direct training costs meant. The second point is I really just completely disagree with this on a small scale array. I don't know what you've heard from other presentations, but it goes to my first point of what really can go wrong. Does everyone, through your research, have you gone through the components of a solar array? You have the panels, you have the racking to hold the panels. That racking typically tilts to follow the sun throughout the day. So there's There's motors that drive the racking to tilt. There's the inverters that convert the power from DC to AC. All of it gets concentrated into a commercial electrical panel like you'd see at any other commercial entity. It's got a main breaker, disconnect, and then from there, it goes through a transformer into the electric grid. So other than a motor failing or a connection failing, there just isn't a ton of stuff to go wrong, but yet in this plan, in the ordinance as written today, it requires 8 hours of annual training, and maybe on a 1,000-acre array, maybe that's something that's needed to know the different. I assume there's multiple driveways to get in there. There's multiple locations, but when you look at our array in Century on 10 acres or our proposed array at Georgetown, I mean, it's on 10 acres. What are you going to do out there for 8 hours a day every year? So this, if this is something you need, again, I would break it up into some exemption for the small group. And then if you feel you need this for larger arrays, maybe that's the spot for it.
So you don't have battery storage? That's what came up in the last one. That's why-
No, and that was gonna be,
That's in here because of the
that's gonna be my next point though, but this ordinance does not regulate battery storage.
Okay.
There's no battery storage defined. There's no battery storage anywhere in here, and maybe that's an entirely separate deal. I mean, I heard that reference too. And that's a completely different. I mean, I can Google videos of fire at battery storage sites. I don't,
You see battery cars on fire, just.
yeah.
So I mean, that's something we should maybe think of to separate that out a little better.
Again, yeah,
Some
I
of these
mean,
have
I think,
storage, some don't. Is that correct? You're not gonna have a battery storage.
No.
This other one is asking for one now, so I guess we have to look at that.
and if that, yeah, I mean, again, that's a completely different situation. And I would agree 100% that it would be wise to have annual training to deal with those. And you can Google, I don't know if it's on YouTube, but I mean, there was a fire at a battery storage facility down in Arizona. And yeah, it's prudent to do that. But again, just if you're looking at plain solar, there's just not that much to fail other than a connection failing and, wildfire. And this is what I was gonna comment on. When you look at our entire electrical system, I mean, fire departments get called out at different times throughout the year through lines going through trees, through pole fires. You have lightning strike a pole, it catches on fire, or you have animals sometimes get hung up and end up causing fires or blowing off the line into the grass and starting a fire. So I think there's a greater probability of the EMS having to respond to a fire in the electric system than there is to responding to a fire at a solar yard, excluding battery storage. And I'm not saying all battery storage is bad. I'm just saying there's a greater risk for problems with the battery storage system than there is in just plain solar. So if that's the intent of why you need 8 hours of training, I would add battery storage into the definition. And then again, maybe you make a section for battery storage in here.
Can that battery storage though be on a small unit though? Like if Kim wanted to put solar panels on his house and Kim wanted to go totally off the grid, he could still have a battery himself.
Yes, there's out of that 158 solar accounts today, there are people today with battery storage in their house. And they're even in arrays our size, I mean, there's nothing to say that we couldn't put battery storage there. It's not, the economics do not work out for us to do that. Maybe at Apple River Solar, the economics are different, but there's more of it coming because it is an intermittent, as you know, an intermittent supply. The sun isn't shining today and they're trying to better maximize the value of that solar by charging those batteries when the sun is out and discharging them in the evening hours. But it is a popular topic in the industry. I guess my point for this ordinance is it's not really relevant unless you the level of detail on emergency management probably is not relevant unless you have batteries there. I mean, I'm not saying it should be zero for the larger arrays, but again, I don't know what you would do for 8 hours of training around a 10-acre array without battery storage on an annual basis. I mean, a lot of the equipment isn't really much different than you see in commercial operations, just a business. You know, they have, we've got businesses with 1,500 kVA transformers, which we have out there, and those businesses have large electrical panels like they're going to have in Georgetown. So all that same equipment is there. So that's why I was curious why you wanted to have so much training around that. But I guess if you were adding in battery storage, that does become a different situation. So again, I don't want to completely knock battery storage, because that is one of the trends in the industry to try to solve a problem with the intermittent type of generation out there. But it just does have a higher level for problems. And yeah, maybe that's all. I'll quit talking on that. So yeah, there just isn't a lot. Again, anything can happen. You can have loose connections anywhere that heat up, start a fire, but I just haven't heard of it. When I asked the developer that question, and he commented on, well, wildfires is a potential, and in some of the more wildfire prone areas out west, that's probably a greater concern for them, but we just haven't seen any problems at our existing array, and we haven't heard of any problems at other arrays in the state that cooperatives own. So my next point is item H. I think it's still under general provisions here. There's quite a few, and it's really referencing the need to provide an annual report documenting operation and maintenance of the renewable energy system. Really, I just don't know why the county really wants to get into that level of detail, because you're not going to be renewable energy experts. So then you're going to have to, you'll hear this a couple different times because it's in the ordinance, a couple different areas about hiring outside experts to review these reports. And I just see that as, again, just duplicating cost and making inserting your expert into the renewable energy generation business. Are you going to understand what they're giving you for O&M reports? And I just, and Jared Burst, our engineer, is going to testify a little bit later on some of the maintenance we've seen on our existing system. So item O, applicant shall design renewable energy system to reasonably minimize the conversion of land from agricultural use. So this statement's a tough one, because the developer is looking for flat land without trees. And I guess I see this as a contradiction with some other language you have in the ordinance, but it says if the developer needs a conditional use permit, and I know you guys know land use and land use permits. It just seems like someone who doesn't want the solar out there could use that as a talking point in front of this committee, saying, well, your ordinance says renewable energy system will reasonably minimize conversion of land use from agricultural use, or conversion of land from ag use. And it just seems like, that's where people want to put them, because your ordinance, as you go through it, it says, don't use ag land here, minimize use of ag land. Later on, it says, don't cut mature trees. And with the conditional use permit section, it says, minimize the moving of topsoil. Well, if you can't put it on flat ag land, and you can't move topsoil on some, a rolling land, and you can't cut trees, where are you going to put it? It just seems like it creates a difficult item to work around when you're trying to get a permit from the county. And I'll circle back to that a little bit later, because there's other areas that talk about that. Item Z, renewable energy system that connects into the electric utility shall Wisconsin Admin Code PSC 119. So this talks about the interconnection into the electric grid, but just be aware that the size and scale again are really defining how you're interconnecting with the electric system. Because PSC 119 regulates up to 15 megawatts. And then your ordinance goes from, you got this gap then from 15 up to 100. And once you start connecting into the transmission system, so again, the system from the generating plants to our substations, that's the transmission system. Once you probably get above 5 megawatts in Polk County, you're going to be connecting into the transmission system because our substations and our load just isn't big enough in Polk County to take all that. I can't take 15 megawatts of generation on any substations because those substations aren't big enough. So more than likely they're connecting into the transmission system. When you connect in the transmission system, you're not regulated by the Public Service Commission. You're regulated by MISO. I'm guessing you heard that from your other discussions. The MISO is the Midwest Independent System Operator. They operate the high voltage transmission grid. So if a developer comes in with a 25 megawatt array, they're not following PSC 119. They're going to MISO and they're saying, I'd like to interconnect. And it's a 2-year process through MISO to get that permission to do those studies. Just a comment on this and is, again, every utility out there, every utility out there is going to already have interconnection standards. If you want to interconnect rooftop solar, we've got a process for that. If you want to interconnect 3 megawatts at one of our substations, there's a process for that. Utilities have this covered. So I guess, you can put this in your ordinance, but again, it is covered elsewhere too by the individual utilities that have the rules and the electrical codes to follow. Moving on, item AA, an owner at the owner's sole expense shall maintain and provide department semi-annual maintenance logs of renewable energy system. The log must contain the following information regarding maintenance performed, date, time, maintenance was performed, nature of maintenance performed, and reasons for the maintenance. An owner shall pay for all costs incurred by the county in connection with monitoring compliance during construction and assessing when solar and wind energy facilities are maintained in good repair. So we're going to provide you the semi-annual reports. Again, it goes to my point, are you going to understand them? And, maybe the big guys do this already, but this just, again, it's lumping on additional work and additional potential expense if we have to pay for an outside expert to review our O&M logs. That again, there really aren't that many things that go wrong. And more to the point, solar developers make their money by selling electricity, selling the output of those systems. They're incentivized to have those systems producing power. When you go into an agreement with the solar developer, you're looking for an off-taker. In the case of Georgetown Solar, Polk Burnett is the off-taker. One Energy Renewables is going to own the equipment. We've signed a purchase power agreement, a PPA, with One Energy, and we're going to buy the power that they produce. Within that purchase power agreement language, there is minimum production levels that they have to provide because we're counting on that energy coming out. We've analyzed our economics and well, if we get this much energy from your solar array, then we don't have to buy this from our normal power supplier, and we're making a little bit of money by doing that. So they have to produce minimums in that contract today. So they're going to keep that system working, functioning to make those minimums. You hear a lot of industry talk about green energy credits, renewable portfolio standards. Any off-taker, any utility that contracts with a developer really needs to be guaranteed some level of output because they're assuming they're going to get that energy. They're going to get those green energy credits to meet some renewable portfolio standards. So the developer really is incentivized to making sure that system is in good operating condition. So again, I have concerns more so on the the smaller units, I guess, I mean, it's obviously I'm here for a special purpose of making sure our small unit doesn't get caught up in this big ordinance, but I'm just saying that, you know, I just seems like it's duplicating effort, which the developer is already incentivized to, you know, they want that system operating to get their rate of return and pay for their initial investment also. My next comment is on, it says 42-7X Solar Energy Systems A4. It's talking about private systems and just pointing out how difficult I don't know, you have ordinance language that says solar energy systems shall be designed to blend into the architecture of the building or structure. And I just have a picture of what a solar energy system out in the front yard of somebody's house looks like. I don't know, the point of that language is how can a bunch of solar panels on a post or a rack ever blend into the architecture of the house? I mean, it's a statement in there, but I don't know how anyone really officially complies with it, but just a point if you want to.
Where was that one?
It just said 42-7XX. I don't know if I have an earlier version.
No, that's what I
What's the
have.
header? Solar
Sol-
energy systems?
Solar Energy Systems A4.
A4, okay. Got it. Page 16.
And it's just, how do you get a solar energy system to blend into your house? I mean, the rooftop ones I could see, it's on the roof, it's part of the roof, but if it's sitting in the yard, I mean, how do you comply with that? Probably not a big issue. I'm just, you know, it doesn't affect Georgetown Solar or any other solar project. It's just a comment of how do you comply? It's comment on the ordinance language. I'm moving on under solar energy systems again, B5B. Large scale removal of mature trees on the site is discouraged. County may set additional restrictions on tree clearing or require mitigation for cleared trees. You know, I see this as making it hard to comply, because where do you put these? If you can't put them on ag, can't put them on mature trees. I already kind of covered that, so I won't beat that one up, but that's just
No,
some,
it says discourage. It doesn't say you have to.
yeah. True. I mean, you know, most developers, when I've talked to them, again, they want a flat site. They want to do as little work as possible to prep the site. If they could just come in there and, you know, remove as little topsoil as possible. You know, they pound in their racking, and maybe Jared could talk a little bit more about that, because he saw it done at our Centuria array. But it is minimally invasive, but yet they want it flat. And yeah, you even have a developer looking at a rolling array or rolling spot, and they say, well, we can do it, but it just isn't going to work as good if it was flat. So my next comment is on 42-793H3. It talks about the benefits to the applicant, and the public will exceed any burdens. And from the video, I kind of got the impression that this is maybe common land use language. I don't know if that's the case or not, but maybe I can't remember if this is under the actual conditional use permit section or not, but I don't know, it just seems hard to quantify that. It's kind of a vague statement and broad, and maybe it's done that way specifically. And maybe that works out for land use discussions or most of your other discussions, but without any definitions, I could see some problems coming in here, because you could get a solar advocate that'll come in here and argue climate change risk, carbon reduction, health concerns, and they can probably cite studies and provide numbers and put a dollar value on that. And you could get an opponent coming in here and arguing, well, yeah, the solar panel is green technology itself, doesn't burn any fossil fuels, but yet the process of making those solar panels is carbon intensive, and the chemicals used to manufacture the solar panels are not really environmentally friendly. And they'll come up and they'll show a cost to all that. So I don't know if you're gonna get yourself into a bind at some point. Normally you would think it'd just be a simple, okay, well, it's gonna cost me X. And my expenses are Y, and this is what the public sees for costs of, well, I'm gonna have to upgrade a road or, whatever you would normally hear for. Whatever you normally hear for your typical land use discussions. I just think it could get more complicated when you start talking about solar and people can quote different numbers for the value of carbon. I mean, that's what you hear today a lot. Section 42-7XX decommissioning F2. Good discussion on decommissioning in here, I guess, but the point I would have is when you're looking for 3 estimates from a mutually agreed upon source. And I think it said every 5 years the county could request an updated estimate. And I understand why you're trying to do that, because you're trying to make sure 4 years down the road that they can decommission it and they're going to be financially viable to decommission the sites. And if not them, the future company that buys them or whatever. The problem I see with that is that's just going to be an additional cost piled on, and then you're doing it times 3. Because it isn't, let's say we're at year 10 of the array and the county asks, okay, well, I don't know if this line of credit or credit letter is going to be any good because maybe the decommissioning costs are, we have concerns over decommissioning costs. Well, how are you going to get people? You're not going to get a vendor in to give you a quote because they're not going to get that work. That decommissioning isn't going to happen for another 20 years down the road. So I'm assuming they're going to charge you for it. Now you're going to get 3 different people to come in and estimate what it's going to cost for decommissioning. And it might just be better if that is something that the committee feels strongly about. Maybe just there's the time to outsource it to a consultant instead of trying to get 3 people. Because I don't think you're going to get 3 vendors in here and do that free of charge thinking they're going to get the work next year, because it isn't next year, it's 20 years. Again, this is probably not my area of expertise because we haven't decommissioned one yet, but I just know that, these leases are many, many years in the future. I think ours in Centuria was a 25-year lease at least, and then it had multiple 10-year additions after that. So its system's going to be there a while. And I understand the approach that the committee wanted here. I just think maybe there's a better way to do it instead of 3 estimates, because all that cost is going to come back on the owner. Land use, my next comment is under 42-793. Land use permit application fees, expirations, pre-application notice. So at least I just have, I guess, an issue here. And again, maybe this is the discussion of size and scale of the unit. And maybe these can be relaxed for the smaller units, but I just don't see the need to notify. You talked, I think Chairman O'Connell talked about the cost to notify the landowners within 1 mile, right at the end of the environmental services hearing. Well, I think the discussion was, well, what if you put one of these around by a lake? You're going to be notifying a lot of people. And that's exactly where our Georgetown array is. And we catch the part of one lake when I draw a circle, a 1 mile circle around that. I just don't see the need to notify the Department of Transportation, the Department of Ag and Trade and Consumer Protection, and the Office of the Deputy Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Defense. Maybe it's relevant for larger arrays. I just can't see what value comes out of that for, again, a 2 megawatt, 10 acre array. So this might be a good opportunity to differentiate the rules by size. If this is something the committee feels strongly about, it just seems like it's excessive for the smaller arrays. Following up in that same area, talking about the permit item G, and this is where the county may require owner to pay additional costs, outside attorneys, engineers, environmental specialists, planners, consultants, experts to cover actual and necessary review costs. And this kind of followed up on the question about notifying the landowners at your meeting on, I think, January 4th, where you said, well, we've got this language in there so we can pass all the review costs along and all of the extra notification costs to the developer. And again, that's just gonna make these small units just hard to justify. So just summarizing now, I guess, when you break it out down, if the concern is wind with the emergency management requirements, maybe the further discussion, the concern was more battery storage. But if the concern with the extra safety requirements is wind, I would break that out into a separate section or a separate ordinance. I think some differentiation for size of units would be appropriate. It'd be great if it was a 0 to 5, because those are gonna connect right into the existing electric system. If you go into a transmission system connection, it's got to be located relatively close to transmission lines, and you're going to be building a substation to move that power from the array up to the transmission system, where today in the 0 to 5 megawatt range, you're just connecting into the existing lines. You want those sites located within probably 2 miles of a substation. You're connecting into the existing lines. It's local. The power is going into the substation and then going out to all the customers on that substation. So just entirely different of the smaller scale units, how they connect into the system and interact versus the larger scale. Again, I've commented a couple of times that I do think these regulations, I've been in your shoes. I know why you're doing it. It does create extra hoops to jump through, and those hoops, they're not paid by the shareholders or developers. You know, it comes in as a higher cost to us, and that ultimately gets cost moved on to the ratepayers. So the units we've been developing, that it's all that power is staying local. So we're looking for hopefully some revisions in this ordinance that reflects the smaller scale system. So with that, I guess I just like to move on and talk just a little bit about Georgetown Solar. Again, Ms. Gerber kind of went through some of the details. If you look at Exhibit 2, maybe, you know, really, when I look at the zoning administrator's response to us saying substantial start. So really, how do you define substantial start? I mean, we were told in January 19th of 22 that no permits were required. And if you look at Exhibit 2 from One Energy, you know, we sent 2 individual letters. I think it's Exhibit 2. If you look at Exhibit 2, this letter, look at the top of that, 1 of 22. So the third item down there. So we signed a letter of intent. And the way we did this, probably glossed over this, but just like anything else, you get a better price if you get scale. So I mean, that's why you see these developers coming in with these big projects. It costs more to do the project of our size. So what we did, we partnered with 9 other electric cooperatives and to do 12 projects. So instead of just a 2 megawatt project, One Energy is doing 20 megawatts of projects for 9 different cooperatives at 12 different sites. So we're getting some of that scale reflected in our price. So there's a lot of coordination involved. So we signed a letter of intent back in October, and all 9 cooperatives signed that. And then in January of 22, we received the information from zoning that said no permit was required. And now if you look on Exhibit 2, just all the work after that point, you look at all the bullet points, all that work's been completed already. And it was, you know, quite a shock that we're getting dragged in under this permit. because so much work has started and we can't undo what we've already started. You know, when we sent this letter with the hopes of saying, yeah, we haven't moved any dirt out there, broken any ground on the site, but I mean, look at all the steps we've gone through, and not only did we do that, we sent our separate letter. So this is kind of the One Energy work. We sent our own separate letter. I don't remember what exhibit number that is from Ms. Gerber. But a lot of work's been done. So then we followed up and said, what is substantial start? And well, the substantial start is the land use really had to change from ag to solar. So if that field doesn't have solar panels in, it isn't considered a substantial start. And you know, we've got commitments signed already. It just seems wrong that, I mean, we started this thing under the intentions of no permits required. And if it wasn't for the supply chain issues that we all experienced last year, we'd be moving dirt out there already. Progress would have been going last fall, but there's just been a mess. Everyone's dealt with the mess of the supply chain. So we just can't undo what we started. And if we start out there, you know, say this ordinance doesn't get passed in March and we start work out there and say it gets passed in May, what are we gonna do now? You know, if we don't have a substantial start on it because don't have panels up yet, but we've got a $50,000 transformer ordered for this project sitting in our yard, and you can't guarantee us a permit. You know, there's no guarantee that when we submit an application, maybe it's looked favorably, but maybe somebody comes in and says, I'll point to the ag use again. This thing, your conditional use permit process says you'll minimize conversion of ag land. Well, this 10-acre project is all ag land. They're not minimizing anything out there. The committee, I want you to deny this permit. So I don't know if this is just advisement and you don't have to take this under consideration of whether it's ag use or not, but it just seems to me that we've spent a lot of money and a lot of time already. And for us to go through the permit process under this ordinance in whatever form it ends up being is a risk that we shouldn't have to take because we reached out. We did our due diligence up front. We did it. You know, we asked for the permits required. We publicly announced this thing. It wasn't a surprise. Shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody. So anyways, I guess that's our position on that. I mean, we just want to move forward with the project under the previous approach prior to the ordinance being proposed. We feel that's the right way to handle that. And I think that's probably the end of my testimony. And I'll give you a written copy just in case I lost you as I started talking with technical terms or referencing sections. You have a copy of my written testimony and
So I would,
Of course I was gonna catch it. You
I-
do it too.
I would prefer not to opine without having potentially a closed session. Obviously, if you want me to, I will, but I think it would be beneficial for the county if actual legal recommendations are given to this committee that it be in a closed
Instead of
session.
in a closed session, okay.
I can advise on what the committee may want to do to ameliorate any issues with a potential substantial start. You could put a cutout in your resolution that says this particular project is not going to be subject to this ordinance, or the ordinance could pass after breaking ground happens or some other substantial steps are taken. Things of that nature could happen. But when it comes to advising on what a substantial start is, I prefer not to.
Okay.
And yeah, the letter I handed you at the beginning from Ms. Gerber and One Energy, the joint letter, I mean, that's a request for some type of exemption and to put this on your next Environmental Services Committee meeting at earliest possible. So, this is my written paper because
I'll keep that.
sorry if I bored you with technical terminology, but it is a technical topic. I know you guys are experts at land use. I don't have anything to say bad about that. It's just that this is more of a technical topic, and we'll have a couple more people testify.
Yep, we'll have a couple.
Exhibit 6.
This will be exhibits, okay.
Okay, yep. Start at will, there's no.
Stage your name and go
Okay.
in order so you don't lose.
Okay. I'm Jared Burst. I have a bachelor's of science degree in electrical engineering from UW Platteville. I've been a power distribution engineer at Polk for over 6 years. One of my first tasks at the co-op was to provide technical analysis for the Sunturia array. And to clear up confusion ahead of time, there's the municipality of Centuria. We named the array Sunturia. It's very difficult to get through in speech, but just be aware they're two different words. I'll try to enunciate correctly. So I looked at the impacts of the Sunturia solar array. It's a 1.25 megawatt solar array sitting on about 10 acres in Centuria, Wisconsin. Since then, I've been the primary local contact for technical issues related to the solar array, and I also do some educational programs with local schools, field trips and things like that on renewable energy in that site. So Sunturia was originally owned and operated by SoCore Energy, and that was later purchased by NG North America. Polk owns the land and purchases the energy from the array, while NG is responsible for the operations and maintenance of the array. And in the 5 years of operation, I would call the maintenance on that site minimal. NG performs one thorough inspection of the site equipment each year. Beyond that, maintenance is on an as-needed basis. Many things can be monitored remotely. There's sensors for snow depth. There's sensors for wind speed and direction. It can detect if the motors that tilt the panels, if there's a fault in them. Occasionally, I'll write them an email, or they'll write me just to verify conditions on the ground that, oh, some of the panels are facing the wrong way or something like that. But that's maybe once or twice a year. After a power outage from a thunderstorm or other event, there might need to be manual replacing of fuses or resetting of circuit breakers, much like at your house. If there's a lightning strike, you might have to pop the circuit breaker both directions to get the motors back online. In a very rare occasion, an inverter, a motor, or some other piece of equipment may need to be replaced. I don't recall any sort of replacement like this happening at Sunturia in the last 5 years since I've been there. The bulk of maintenance is actually vegetation management. So those subcontractors visit the site about 6 times a year. That's going to vary depending on rainfall. They might do seeding, cutting, herbicide application, but far and away, the most activity out there is vegetation management. So in summary, Sunturia has an annual physical inspection and regular visits for vegetation management during the growing season. Maintenance needs for the mechanical, electrical, and communication systems are minimal and generally occur on an as-needed basis. I believe this is sufficient for safe and reliable operations of this solar array.
So so it's about the same size and everything, so that would apply to the new one also.
Yeah, it's similar. That's 1.25 megawatt. This will be 2 megawatts. That one sits on about 7 acres. This one would be, I think, 10. I don't know, is it over 10 or is that the approximate size?
They might have more land than 10, but I think it's 10 acres of panels.
Okay. I usually round up that one to 10 acres, even though it's 7 acres, just for, ballparking.
All right. Some questions.
And I have a copy. I don't know if you want that or not, but
Sure. Yep, if you have it in writing, great.
I did forget to offer a tour too. I mean, if this is something Jared gives our tours, if this is something the committee ever wanted to see, how the tilting works or just what's involved, after the snow, after the snow goes away, that could definitely be arranged too.
Okay, sure.
I think so.
All right.
Mr. Chair, can I just have Jared spell his last name for me so I have it documented?
It's also in that document, but it's, first name is Jarod, so one R and O.
Okay.
Last name is B as in boy, OERST. I think I'm the only one in Polk County, like when I look at my tax records, I just have to put in my last name, that's it.
You didn't want to try spell that, huh?
No, I was wrong, so I'm glad I asked.
Okay. I'm Ed Gullickson. I live in the town of Garfield. I have been on the board of directors at Polk Electric for 15 years, serving 13 years as board president. I was appointed to the board of directors on Dairyland Power Corporation, which is our main wholesale power supplier in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Just finished a 3-year term as chairman of the board for Dairyland Power. The only reason I bring this up is we had a meeting on Monday with Dairyland Power, myself and individuals from other co-ops in the state of Wisconsin. And one of the main topics was the cost of solar and wind energy and what has happened over the past 2 to 3 years. So up until about the end of 21, the solar prices were very stable. They varied a little bit from developer to developer and from size, different size configurations and that. But overall, the pricing to the retailer basically was pretty stable. At the beginning of 22, the pricing started to change drastically. And to give you a little idea of what has happened in the last year, the pricing has basically doubled. So if you're looking at a wholesale rate of 4 cents per kWh a year ago, today that price is 8 cents. Now 4 cents and 8 cents doesn't sound like a lot of money, but somebody has to pay it. And you add transmission capacity and MISO charges to that, and all of a sudden you're extremely high for supplemental energy. Someone has to pay that bill. And we have a contract at a certain rate, and the board of directors is very concerned that if we have to go through another permitting process and we extend out of our contract, we're going to have to renegotiate. Renegotiating that contract at this time is going to increase the costs to our members considerably. And it's not just a one-time cost, it's every day for 20, 30, 40 years. So we're a little bit concerned on who's going to pay that cost, and the reason that those costs are going to be increased if we have to renegotiate. So it's a very legitimate concern on the board's part. You heard testimony from Steve and Heather and Garrett. So I hope you take this into consideration and exempt us for this particular project that we're already 3/4 of the way through. Any questions?
I got a question. So when you talked about the 4 and 8 cents.
Yeah.
Are you talking about what it cost you to buy that energy from whoever owns that, or are you talking about the build cost of that rate?
Yes, that's a wholesale rate. And then you would have to add your transmission, your capacity, and your MISO charges on top of that. So what we try, and I think Steve can explain it better than I can. Huh?
That'd be the price out of the PPA.
Right. And so you have to add the other charges to it. And we try and when we sign a contract like this, we have always tried to make that price meet our contract price, meet our wholesale price from Dairyland.
So, it's, everybody thinks that alternative energy is free. It's not free by any means, so. Any other questions?
So you're saying the cost of the energy coming out of the solar arrays has doubled in cost?
Yes,
Okay.
in the last year. We were very fortunate in signing the contract that we did. Because we basically, just to put it in layman's terms, we basically were able to sign a contract at the old price. And if we were to have to renew that contract or renegotiate that contract, it would be double. And Dairyland just went through that. I spent 3 years while I was chairman of the board down there on communication, when they were dealing and negotiating on their wind contracts, their solar contracts, and you could just see the pricing going up and up and up. So, and of course, their configurations are 100 megawatt, 150 megawatt. They just signed one. It took 3 years to negotiate on a solar contract called Badger. You may have heard about that in southern Wisconsin. And they just completed that contract. They started negotiating on that. I think it went up, by the time they got done, it went up about 30%. So we're very concerned about the price increase. And I think our 22,000 or 21,000 members would also be concerned.
Okay, any other questions?
Been in a long time.
All right. Should we read that letter into that he brought?
You want me to?
Or,
There's some emails and stuff too.
oh,
So-
so you guys, you talk to it.
You'd like me to, I can read it in. So
Or should we read that in and then,
this would be exhibit 5. So
I got 6 and 7 here.
You gave him 5.
What?
You gave 5.
Yep, I got 5.
Yeah, we should probably, let's read that in.
Okay. So everybody knows this is a joint letter that was signed by Heather Gerber and Eric Udohoffen, and that from One Energy Renewables. It's dated February 15th, 2023. It's addressed to the Polk County Environmental Services Committee. It is regarding the exemption from the proposed renewable energy systems ordinance. And it goes like this: Polk County Environmental Services Committee, One Energy Renewables and Polk Burnett Electric Cooperative have been working together for nearly 2 years on a 2 megawatt solar project in the town of Georgetown. We are seeking an exemption from the proposed renewable energy systems ordinance for the following reasons. Number one, One Energy received written confirmation on January 19th, 2022 from the Polk County Zoning Administrator that the selected parcel of land required no permits. Exhibit 1. Timelines were created, binding contracts were executed, and planning for the project was performed with the assumption that no permits were needed. Requirements to follow the proposed ordinance at this stage in the project will extend the completion date of the project substantially, add unanticipated cost, and create a risk that a conditional use permit may not be issued. The physical construction phase, and this is number 2 now, of a solar project is the last phase in a long process. The ordinance references requirements that must be completed before construction. We believe the stages completed and listed below qualify as having begun construction of the project. Then their bulleted list: lease signed with the landowner, analysis conducted on the proposed site, signed power purchase agreement and interconnection agreement between One Energy and Polk Burnett. Outside financing has been secured for the project. Material for the project has been procured. One Energy and Polk Burnett have collectively spent $575,000 on materials and over 600 hours of staff time on this project. A contractor has been selected for the construction of the project to begin as weather permits in spring of 2023. Coordination is occurring with multiple other projects within the state. Then it goes back into paragraph. Had the renewable ordinance been in effect at the inception of this project, the steps to comply with it would have been addressed in the planning stage. We ask that as we near the final stages, that the Georgetown Solar Project be exempt from the requirements of the proposed renewable ordinance. We are requesting the exemption be placed for action on the earliest possible Environmental Services Committee agenda. Thank you, and then sincerely, Heather and Eric. So with that, there is an email that I had wrote to Eric and Beth. I don't think you guys have heard from Beth Esser. She's with One Energy Renewables as well. This was sent from me to them. Steve was copied and Bob was also copied. And this was on January 26th. Here was my response. Actually, I'm gonna back up so that it's in order. We have the whole email chain. Okay, so this is Beth Esser, and this is January 14th. Dear Jason, thanks again for returning my call last week about permitting in Polk County for a solar project. Sorry, January 14th of 2022. On parcel 026-1292 and 026-1287. As I mentioned, our engineering team was working on the site layout. They have drafted the attached. Would you please review and reply with written confirmation if this project falls outside of the shoreline zoning area and therefore would not need a permit from Polk County? We'd also appreciate if you could confirm that the town of Georgetown does not require a permit. Please let us know if you have any feedback or questions. My response on January 19th of 2022, hi Beth, yes, you have picked a location that is outside of the shoreline area and therefore no zoning approvals or permits are needed from the county to construct this layout. You would want to contact Bill Kep at 715-790-3688 for the town. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Thanks, Jason. Then we fast forward in that until this year, January 25th of 2023. Dear Jason, I hope this email finds you well. Last year at this time, we spoke on the phone and then confirmed via email below that the solar project we are developing with Polk Electric Cooperative did not meet a permit from Polk County. This project is scheduled for construction this year, beginning in April of 2023. We are writing now regarding the proposed solar ordinance in Polk County. Could you please confirm if our project is exempt from the new solar ordinance? And then there was another question. Jason, quick follow-up question and clarification. Our project is intending to start construction between now and April. Can you clarify when the new ordinance would go into effect if it is approved, and at what point the new projects would need to comply with its requirements? This is the last email, January 26th of 2023. It's from me to them. Good morning, Eric and Beth. Polk County will be holding a public hearing on several ordinance amendments, including the new renewable energy provisions on February 15th. If there are no substantial changes to the amendments by the committee, the proposed ordinances could go to the March County Board meeting, March 21st. If there are substantial changes by the committee, the process could get delayed because we would have to hold another public hearing. Whether the ordinance applies or not will depend on when the ordinance goes into effect and when your project starts. If the amendments stay on track with the timeline above and you begin construction in April, you would need to comply with the new ordinance. If you have a substantial start on the project before the ordinance goes into effect, then the ordinance would not apply. While the ordinance does have some additional hoops, it was not the intent of the committee to prohibit renewable energy systems. And in that parentheses, just have more due process for the county and neighbors, parentheses. You will notice that the most of the provisions are directly from the Public Service Commission Administrative Code and Wisconsin Statute 66.0401 and 66.0403. I have attached a draft copy of the ordinance for your review, and please let me know if you have any other questions. Thanks, Jason. So that was all of Exhibit 5. And then Exhibit 6 that we have is the written testimony from Steve's
Correct.
talk. And then Exhibit 7 is a written testimony from Jared.
Yeah.
So just so they have the record clear.
So we have those straight. Okay. All right, so then procedurally wise, we want to send this back to the committee to go through with some of the changes that were recommended. Also, for that last exhibit for the exemption and stuff, to have a closed session with corporation counsel to get a definition of substantial start too, which it might fall under. And maybe go that way with this one at least. If our next meeting isn't too full, or then the one after that, the second, March, the first one of March, pretty full.
Not really. I can, no, it's not too bad. You could do a review only of ordinance 1023, which is the adoption of this renewable energy.
So we could go through it again and see if you know, because we had some changes that we could look at too,
Sure.
There's a lot to consider.
to go through for small and stuff. So I think we should maybe.
And then would you like it to also have the closed session with corporation
I think
counsel?
so.
Okay.
Then he can give us his whatever. Safely.
Right.
For the March, for the second meet,
For
next
the
meeting.
March
March
1st. Yep.
March
So-
first meeting.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be a public hearing. We would just review the ordinance.
We just review it. I mean, the public could be, of course. But that's, then, I mean, at least to go through it, review it. Then we can go through it and decide what we're gonna do. Now, I mean, right now, I think we're gonna get it up beyond April, so if you start, I can't say for anybody if that's a substantial start, but it seems to me that is, but I'm not a lawyer.
Is there anything, is that a consensus of the committee then?
Yeah.
We can ask everyone, yeah, that we should look at this one some more.
Is there anything that you would like me as staff to do, or is there any direction?
At that smaller size, if that makes more sense, that, you know, to start with, that was one of his big ones. You know,
So a carve out for those smaller systems.
yeah.
3
kind of for
megawatts or
smaller
less.
Systems, you know, to make the scales a little better that way, and then maybe some of the these annual report was one, would just be for the larger maybe.
Okay.
The annual report, one of the fellows said they get an annual
Right.
report every year anyway, so it's something that they are already doing.
Yeah. So
And
it's repetitious, yeah, so.
yeah, it's,
We might.
it
that
is
might
an
just come out
additional cost
to everybody.
because you're already doing it. Already getting an annual report.
We don't receive the annual report, but they do an annual inspection. I assume it's something we could request.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because it's interesting because it's nice to know annually what's happening. Like you said, well, you haven't had any of this, but you've had a little bit of this, but it's nice to see that in a report. So you know what's, you know what's going on, because some of the solar stuff is so new. We're being told the life expectancy of a solar panel is 20 years. It's kind of yet to really be proven, because so many of them haven't been, it's just minimal what's been
But I
out
was
there.
thinking that would just go.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
at the small scale to take some of this out to that.
So there's a reason why those are in there. And the reason why those are in there is because when we look at decommissioning, and that we need to know whether or not that solar panel is producing power.
Yeah.
And so I can drive by a solar field and it could be all not creating any power. So, and that if we don't have some kind of reporting to us, how do we know if it is creating that power? And then at what point do those 365 days kick in
Yeah.
start that process.
Yeah.
And that, so that was the reasoning. I mean, they brought up a lot of points and I'm not gonna take and go and, go against those, but I mean, there are reasons for
For them.
all these provisions on why they're there.
The minimum training for
The
EMS,
training.
8
for
hours.
batteries. Yeah, because we don't have anything for battery storage. We have really,
So you want to work on that definition then as well?
I think so. I think if there's batteries in there.
Is March 1 okay with you guys, or would you rather push it back to March 15th or?
Just an answer to Vince. I'm sitting here and saying, in my mind, there's a lot to analyze here because
Yeah.
we've been talking about everything I've been writing down the size of these. And they don't seem to fit into this larger scale. that We're talking about. So I think we might have to have a line drawn. I don't know where the line goes and I apologize. I just don't know way I could. But we need a line possibly higher to fit these companies so they can do this,
Yeah,
without being overregulated.
without, yeah.
Yeah, I know, last week on Thursday, I had received a call from Fritz with Nokomis Energy and they're a firm out of Minnesota area over there. And they specialize in the 6 to 7 acre solar facilities and that because they don't have the same ability in that to get larger tracts of land over there, especially in the more suburban areas. And it does sound like a conditional use process is very common and that they all require a CUP at least and a lot of them require rezones according to Fritz with Nokomis. So but that was their niche, is to pick on the smaller development sites. So
We heard.
So I guess-
5 megawatts or less can tie into the existing grid.
is that
Is
the
that the
level
threshold
that
then?
you want?
Well,
What's
we
the
have them
threshold?
help us out a little.
5 megawatts or less is what they can tie into the existing grid and not to the transmission lines. And that if they're over 5 megawatts, then they have to try into the main transmission lines that are running.
There's a transformer.
We haven't met that yet here, so
Right, and 5 megawatts, and that would be roughly between 40 and 50 acres, roughly. So would be the size.
Most.
Well, it said that code PSC 119 regulates up to 15 megawatts only. And then everything goes into transmission lines after that. And not directly into your lines.
So I think we maybe have to look into that a little more and see if we can divide some of that up.
So what are you recommending? The 5 megawatts or less?
I can't recommend it now.
Right.
Sure.
Until we have more discussion on
Yeah.
what all these figures mean.
Provide a recommendation.
Maybe even a field trip, Bob.
We'll take Steve up on his offer and
I'm all about field trips.
As long as it
Kind of like to
doesn't involve-
see stuff before I vote on it, kind of like that.
Except for the bridges.
that's a good point. If you would give us a little more time, maybe we can do a little more research, yeah.
Give us a little more time and if.
We better pray for a lot of snow reduction.
But does it have to be? Do these, because there are two different questions that are being asked. Updating this ordinance and then does this project apply to this ordinance? So can we address them at two separate times?
Well, it doesn't apply to theirs yet until this ordinance goes through.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
They can move forward.
But there's been a lot of talk about that email that I had from January of 2022. And if I had that same email come across my computer today, I'd have to answer it the same exact way because the ordinance isn't in
Sure,
effect
it
yet.
isn't.
So really, any exemptions right now are premature because there's nothing to exempt it to.
Nothing to
Right.
exempt
And
it.
that, so,
Okay.
so the county could delay, and if the county delays long enough, that they have a substantial start on their project, then the ordinance would not apply.
Okay,
And that, so,
It's a timing issue.
Trip in
Yeah.
there.
so.
Yes.
So I've been town chairman for 30 years. And we have written approximately 20 ordinances in the last 25 years. So they have all basically been written by attorneys. with the help of the board and the board requesting their help. Every one of those 3 attorneys that have helped us have stated that when an ordinance is written and approved and put into existence, you can't go back and enforce that ordinance on pre-existing issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't go back.
And I'm wondering if that would apply in this particular case, because
We have right now we have no,
Yeah, we don't have.
No.
we have no ordinance now.
so there isn't anything for you to even apply for.
Right.
Right, that's where.
So I mean, if we get our definition, start, you might be there anyway.
Yeah,
You're
that's-
probably there, but right now, it looks like we probably want to look at this stuff on 15 of November.
Of
to have
May,
enough,
March,
because we need
of
to do
March.
And if we have a field
Small
trip,
things,
that'll delay it a little more.
Well,
than
if we need
have
more input,
another.
but I mean, we might have to have another public hearing, which would be probably April. or something.
If we add another different size and that to it, then yeah, I'd say that's a substantial enough amendment that would require a public hearing.
Then we probably
Yeah.
won't have
So-
another public hearing like this till April. But then we would, the next meeting, we'll get the definition of substantial start. How's that? Is that what,
Okay.
that's the help you
So
need.
you can understand why we're
You're
getting a
sitting
little
there.
nervous on this.
So if we have a closed session at our next meeting,
Okay.
see what substantial start is, that'll help.
I'm not quite following your thought pattern as compared to mine, because they have a substantial start.
Yeah.
I think so
Yeah.
too.
I don't see how you could even say you gotta break ground to be a substantial
Right.
start.
Right.
They've
So
got,
that's why we
they've
just,
got years of work into this.
but we better have our legal opinion that is cover
Yeah.
all of us.
I just,
And then it can move forward.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
I got
I almost
that.
said it, I just didn't want to say it.
Yeah.
I think it's a substantial start. Let's get a definition. for
They've acted without needing anything in place.
And that
Now
would
we're
keep
putting
it-
something.
That'll keep this going because this is all brand new for us anyway. So I mean, we needed help like this to come in here.
There's a lot to learn in this particular ordinance.
Oh, gosh, yes.
So
And it's like anyone, we'll find something wrong with it, just like these other ones that we're gonna go through that we gotta change.
But at least we're making a start
Yeah.
because we didn't have
We didn't have, it.
it.
yeah. So at
So
least we
now
got
we're
something to
gonna
start.
have something and we're starting to hear more and more about solar. I mean, working with this Apple, we learned a lot working with through the Apple
Yeah.
River one. And that's been an interesting process too. I know it's a lot bigger, but
And that's where I think some of the concerns came from too.
Yeah,
is-
a
is
lot
that
of them.
That was the catalyst that started some of this.
Yeah, these bigger ones, so.
just to comment, and then I'll cut it off. So approximately 15 years ago, I think, I don't remember the name of the energy company, but they came into the Polk County area. And they basically did a study from the southern border of Garfield all the way up through Frederick. And it might have been a little bit farther north than that. And they did wind tests and at different site locations throughout this area. And I'm sure that information is available. Was that Geronimo?
Geronimo, yeah,
Geronimo.
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 The study at that time basically said there just simply is not enough wind in this particular area of the county to be economical
For the wind.
for wind.
And they just went up and down the St. Croix waterway and said that was the
I
only
think that
spot.
was it. You probably remember.
I remember.
Okay,
Yeah, they went up and down the waterway and just pretty much everything was within a mile of it.
Yeah.
That's Geronimo. Okay. So then let's take that one consensus, move it to the second meeting, so we have time to do it. Okay.
Okay. And just so I'm gonna be doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and that you'd like me to carve out provisions for small scale solar, 0 to 5 megawatts, define battery storage, And then look at the EMS training and annual reports and the O&M reports.
Yeah, that sounds, yes.
Okay.
Let's see what else I marked here.
So do you take, Jason, do you take Steve's, kind of his rundown through the whole entire ordinance, and do you like do a kind of like insert those where, you know, not maybe using the same text, but insert those things so you can kind of see what they would look like in this ordinance itself?
Yeah, it'd probably be just creating a separate provision. So if you go down through the ordinance, we've got it separated into large wind and that with the subcategories for noise and shadow flicker and stuff. So, and then we've got solars, then we've got solar right now in private and commercial use. So we'd have to create another blob in that for small solar, just roughly talking. I haven't, you know, really spent that much time thinking about what it would look like, but.
Because that was where the 1 mile, remember, if you guys. Yeah.
I mean, just so we're addressing, because we're all on the same page with, you know, like the training and all of the different things that he mentioned. It's just seeing them in that, you know, format would kind of,
That would fall under.
Yeah.
The large scale and not the smaller.
yeah.
You know, I guess there's a reason why, you know, and that it comes from extension too is being, you know, suggested for those bigger gaps, the 0 to 30 and the 30 to 100. And that now that I fall back to that presentation that I was at, is similar to the CAFO issue, you know, and that because if not, you'll have Apple River Solar, Apple River Solar Field, you know, and that LLC. So you get all these different entities and that are the 999ers in a CAFO and that are just under 1,000. And that so that they just keep on skirting all of the provisions for training EMS, for doing stormwater erosion, for doing all the decommissioning financial assurance. You know, so I think that's why UW Extension has kept, you know, the field smaller so that there's not that, you know, so that every project can be looked at as a whole, not as a whole bunch of mini projects. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because, I mean, I don't want us to make the assumption that everything you were saying in question that we're gonna change. I think we need to understand
Yeah.
more why we should change it. Does it make sense for us to change it?
Yep, I have no problem drafting, so, yeah.
Well, and I think about the decommissioning part of it. So you already said that solar field over in Century has been sold once, right? The people that are managing the solar panels has already been sold once in 5 years. So I think on the decommissioning side, that's where some of that money comes. I know why you're against it. I get that. But if we're just gonna keep, you know, every couple of years, these keep getting sold, who's gonna be the one that cleans it up?
I wasn't necessarily against the decommissioning language as a whole. I was more specifically targeting getting 3 estimates every 5 years to
Right.
update your number. I just think, never done it. I don't know if there's gonna be if that's gonna be a problem. It just seems like maybe it's you agree on one guy or one person to
Well, you'd be hard-
consultant firm to do the study instead of
You'd
trying
be
to
hard
find
pressed to
3.
get 3 estimates because there isn't even one facility in the state of Wisconsin that decommissions solar panels.
And
So where do you go to get an estimate?
And
That's
I'm
the
gonna be honest, I
question.
mean, we haven't gone through that process yet, so, I mean, I testified to that, so I mean, I don't know all the steps in there. I just thought the 3 estimates, you know, normally if you get a vendor and say, oh, you know, give me 3 quotes and I'll choose the quote I want and go with that, but because could be 20 years in the future, I just thought there's a better way to do that, but I'm not necessarily against letter of credit or whatever that you would normally require.
Could that be like a bond, like for the gravel pit side of it?
Yeah, that's kind of.
Correct. And this is, and one that's even more spot on than the gravel pit side of it is our cell towers. Okay, so we do biannual reports out to all of our cell tower providers. And that what we're asking for is maintenance and repair. And that is there the ability to co-locate on them, you know, that any changes in ownership, any changes in financial assurance. So we have a standard form and that goes out biannual on even years. Okay. So that's kind of where that annual report came in. And that as far as the O&M, yeah, I mean, you, us, and that I'm not going to know if that's adequate maintenance or not. And that, but similar to the cell towers again, especially with the 5G push that's going on, we've had a bunch of permits so far in 2023 now, switching over to 5G. One of the things that we require is a structural analysis, and that from an engineer stating that the tower is sufficient capacity, because I mean, some of them towers, they don't look like it from down on the ground, but are 10, 13 feet tall. And they're adding and subtracting. How do we know what the loading of that tower is, 200 or 350 feet in the air? So they provide us with a structural analysis on every land use permit that they do. They also provide us with wet stamped PE plans for the construction, and that shows where every wire is being run even on the plant. So that's kind of some of the thought process that was put into the solar to try to, keep that. And that's where the outside parties comes into effect too, because we need to be able to trust a PE, even though I know that they're, could maybe be favoring whoever's paying them or who hired them, but generally if they have a license, they have to put their name on it. So.
And take ethics classes.
What's that?
The PEs have to take ethics classes. I
Yeah.
mean, they
Well,
can't.
you hope in that. So, but you
I
can,
know.
well, I know, but you can turn on the news every day and
Yeah,
see ethics violations. So,
sure. Okay.
so anyway, so that's just some explanation on why those provisions were originally created. Yeah.
Okay.
So. All right, so we done with F on renewable
I think
energy.
we're done on F with that one then, and that'll come back. And maybe on this next meeting, we'll just have that closed session.
Right.
For definition.
Yeah, we have a staff have a different perspective about what's substantially
Yeah,
developed
so
and
that's
not.
what I mean. We should
And
get those two.
it deserves
together.
to be in closed session.
And then
So,
that'll move us forward, and with that many changes, there'll be another public hearing next week. So that'll draw it out.
We appreciate your time listening and, yeah, I know we're on different sides of things here, but appreciate what you do.
Well, it does help that you're here to explain it to us.
And
That's a lot
I don't
of it
expect
right there.
Jason to agree with everything I wrote, and I didn't agree with everything Jason wrote, but hopefully
There was no intent about your project. I even
There's-
told Bob, I'm like,
hope
I
there's
didn't even
someplace in
think
the
about the
middle.
Polk Burnett solar project and that when we were doing this. So, and it wasn't like we were trying to shut down that project. So anyway.
And we'd have just passed it quick.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for the information.
Should we go back up to B?
Let's go back up to what? Oh, I did last here. So the floodplain one, then, yes.
Okay. So
I don't know, do we have to go through there is nobody here, is there?
all I've got is a summary in that for you, just to remind you of what the changes are. So B is consideration and recommendation on ordinance 06-23 amendments to the Polk County floodplain zoning ordinance. And just to bring you back, and that to what's been going on with that one. The original intent of opening up that ordinance was the DNR took and came out with a new model ordinance in March of 22. So it's brand new. A lot of that ordinance language is very similar to our ordinance. But there was several changes in that where the wording was just a little bit different. So there's a lot of red text in that draft that I've got there. But simply to take and save my time and that from going through and just amending it word by word, I copied and struck, that large portions and copied it from the DNR's model ordinance and put it into there. The main two changes, and that you'll notice in the ordinance is Polk County always had an appendix for our hydraulic and hydrologic studies. So they call them an H&H. And for our dam failure analysis, they were a part of our appendix. The DNR is no longer accepting those studies to be put into an appendix. They want them in the official maps section of the ordinance. And then they wanted a brief paragraph in that describing what the maps are called, what the downstream or hydraulic shadow of the floodplain area was called, what the floodway data tables were called, what the flood curve data was called. So anyway, 4 or 5 hours later, and that at least, we took and moved those from the appendix into the official maps. And so, but there's no substantial changes. All of our maps and that from before are still in our ordinance. They're still updated, and all the information is correct. So I kind of understand why they're doing that, because then, if paper copies are lost, at the county level, then they do have something electronically, in an ordinance form to know what those were gonna be called, so that if the DNR can go back and find those old documents, we at least know that we have the right ones. And the main policy change in the draft is 2019 Act 175 was passed by the state. The DNR didn't come out with that model ordinance until 2022, so that's why here we are almost 3 years later, going through with this. But what it does is it removes the 50% threshold for anybody that's doing O&M or improvements to their property if it's within the floodway. So right now, if the Act 175 changes are not put into place and you have a building that's in the floodway and the assessed value is $100,000 on that property based on the tax roll, and that you can only put $50,000 worth of improvements into that building. Okay, and that if we adopt the ordinance as is proposed, and that Act 175 would allow them to go all the way up to the full assessed value, or to be able to replace the whole building in the same footprint. However, they still have to comply with the floodproofing measures and stuff so that we don't increase our regional flood elevation and we don't impact other people down the stream. So in other words, it's kind of a win-win. The county gets the building brought up into code, and that because if they only spent the $50,000 on O&M, they wouldn't have to do that. So the county gets win-win that we get it up to, at least being flood-proofed. And two is that they're able to replace. So, and I think that that's gonna apply to very, very few structures in the county, and that, so it's not a big impact, but it is kind of keeping up with the times, so. So yeah, all the changes, I've been working with Michael Rogney, he's the dam engineer, and that with the DNR for our area. And also Mia Van Horn, and she's been the ordinance reviewer. And we have received preliminary approval on our ordinance and that from them. So once, if the committee passes this on to county board, the county board adopts, and that then we have to send them like our publication notices. We have to have an affidavit of that with the newspaper. We have to send them the ordinance, send them all of our notices that we did, our procedure and that through the committee and through the county board. And then they'll certify our ordinance so that the people in the county can have flood insurance. So.
Okay,
So it's a big deal to kind of keep up on, and you don't want to get out of it. Otherwise it affects all the people in your community, that from being able to get flood insurance. That's what FEMA terms us, is a community, so.
okay. Let's take that one then, unless there's any questions. We should entertain a motion to move it on or not.
I'll make a motion to move it on.
Move it on, okay. Is there a second? Okay, Doug.
So we're not voting on
Just to move it to the
resolution,
full
just
board.
to move it to the board.
Yeah, to move it to the full board, that we,
With recommendation.
with recommendation.
Yep.
And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, okay. All right, we can move into.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So this is consideration and recommendation to the full county board on ordinance 0723 amendments to shoreline zoning ordinance. This has to do with one of the handouts that I provided you this morning, and that's an email from Mike Wenholtz. In our exhibit packet for all of our hearings today, I'd like to make that exhibit 8. Mike's got 5 bullet points there. Really, there's only 2 of them that apply, 3 and 4. He's questioning some of our exempt structure provisions. The 2 that he's questioning are shoreline structures that are previously permitted by the DNR. So that would be riprap, docks, that kind of stuff. So I need to clarify that with Mike. I tried calling him this morning and that at 8:30. And that, but I didn't get any answer, so I'm assuming he must work later in the evenings and then maybe come in later in the morning. The other one, and that which has been in the ordinance before, this wasn't a new change or anything. The other one that he questioned, and that was the erosion control measures as implemented by the Land and Water Resources Department here at the county. And that's not really a structure, but I think it's important to have in there because we don't generally try to over permit or duplicate permit with Land and Water. Land and Water is doing a lot of the Healthy Lakes programs and that where they're planting plants along the shoreline. And those erosion control measures and that are then exempt, you know, and so it's just a clarification in there. I'm pretty confident when I talk to Mike and that if I explain that, that will be fine because we've been certified for the last 25 years with those provisions in it. So, but anyway, so those were his comments. Otherwise, it looks like everything is able to be approved with the shoreline ordinance on the NR 115 side, because Mike is only going to look at it from NR 115, the administrative code perspective. So setbacks, impervious, exempt structures, that kind of stuff. The other changes that we made or that are proposed in that ordinance are also 2021 Act 200, which has to do with the viewing corridor. We've always administrated it as 35% of your total lot frontage. The old text or the old state law actually says it's 35 feet for every 100 feet of shoreline. The reason why Act 200 came about is because there was a lot of counties that if you only had 99 feet of frontage that said, nope, you don't get to have a viewing corridor. You know, but if you have 180 feet, you still only get to have a 35-foot viewing corridor because you don't have 200 feet. We've always said it's 35% across the board, so it's not really a policy change on that aspect from us. But it also does put in a minimum viewing corridor width of 10 feet. So if you had a 10-foot access strip going down to the water, you could actually clear cut the whole thing to have your 10-foot viewing corridor. And then it also puts in a maximum of 200 feet. So if you have 1,000 feet of shoreline, even on a small lake, right now you could clear 350 feet. And that the old rule prior to Act 55 back in 2015 was a maximum of 200 feet. So they put that 200 foot back in there. So that is a new max. So that was done. Any questions on that one? Okay, there was another bill that went through at the state. It was called 2021 Act 105, and it was pertaining to privacy fences. And evidently there must have been one situation where somebody was denied a privacy fence because it was a very narrow scope, but it exempted privacy fences if you were like at least 2 feet off the ordinary high water mark and at least 10 feet off the road right away, that you could build a privacy fence within that area. The only place in that we've used it, believe it or not, which I didn't even think we would, was up on Half Moon, where you got a road going really close to the shore. And I believe that was the same situation that was brought to the state, and that because they had car lights shining into their house windows and stuff as they were coming around a curve. So they wanted a privacy fence to block it. So it's got a very little applicable scope, but it is something that we do have to, that's a required change. So we just exactly copied DNR text and put it into the ordinance. Okay, going on to adult establishments. Adult establishments were defined in the shoreline section and also in the general section. The use itself, and that was put as a conditional use in our 2 shoreline zoning commercial classifications, which is B2 and B3. So small business commercial and recreational business commercial, if you adopt the ordinance, would have adult establishment as a CUP option. Supervisor Olson wanted some new, I'll call it leading language in the Ag 1 and the Ag 2 zoning classifications, or Ag 10 and Ag 20. And that to protect farmers from their normal course of operations and business if they're zoned in that zoning classification. So that has to do with noise, smell, dust, hours of operation, that kind of stuff. So there was 2 sentences added to each one of those zoning classifications right at the very beginning. And that clarifying that if you're in or near one of those zoning classifications, those kinds of activities and the impacts, the noise and stuff, and that can be expected. Okay, and then this was in the original draft too, and that the permit revocation process was clarified. And I don't know if clarified is the right word or simplified, and that because before there was a warning that had to be issued, that warning provision was removed. And then if a permit had been revoked, and that there'd be a 1-year stay or waiting period before they could reapply for the same permit. And that 1-year time frame that went back to the consistency with the BOA procedures ordinance. So if somebody applies for a variance, they have to wait a whole year before they can reapply for the same exact variance. Logan Hacker with our office and that brought up a good point about defining what a retaining wall is. So that was included in the new draft as well to define that. The R1 zoning district was allowed up to 6 poultry. So now on any residential or R1 zone property, and that you'd be able to have 6 poultry. And no roosters. And they have to be fenced. So price of eggs is up, yeah. So. And then this is a one that's in the comp too, but the short-term mining classification was changed. It went into more zoning districts. But it was defined underneath the short-term mining definition rather than in the mining district itself. So that was just, the intent is still the same. We've had a couple of situations in that have abused the intent of that. The intent is, so if Mo with the highway department or a town needs road sand, and that while they're building up a town road or a county road, and they have a nice sand source right there that they can open up that pit, not have to come through and be rezoned and go through a conditional use, not have to be reclaimed, anything like that, that they can go into that pit, use the material and then close up that pit. So that's the intent of it. And so we tried to work on the wording between Eric and Dane with Land and Water and that, so that we're all on the same page and that it's better. So those were the summary of the changes for the Shoreland that we've talked about before. Now, in the handout that I provided you today, there was a clarification that was brought to me by Chairman Wook, which is also the chair of the town of Lincoln. They've been getting quite a few reduced private road setbacks, and our current ordinance and that allows for a town to approve a reduced private road setback. And so the town of Lincoln in particular, and I've heard this from other towns as well, and that is that they don't want the ability to approve a private road setback. And they're really concerned about, future legal ramifications if they're approving, buildings to be closer to the road. They are saying that, hey, we don't take and plow them. We have no maintenance. We have no, ownership to the road. We really don't have anything to be involved with. And so I thought Chairman Mook was going to be here today. But I did tell him that I would be having this and presenting you all a copy. And so he was good with that. And so basically in that draft, there's 2 different things. We got to do it in the general and in the shoreline. So the top one there would be to remove it out of 4214 for the general zoning portion, just by crossing out town or a private road. And then the other one, and that we would need to take and just clarify that by the town not being able to approve them. So removing those last sentence and a half or 2 sentences. So, and then what would happen is people would still be able to apply for a reduced road setback, but it'd be similar in that to like a state highway where they would apply to the Board of Adjustment. So then it comes to the county Board of Adjustment rather than going to the towns. So.
Didn't we put this in though, so that the towns did it and not us to have to do all this?
We did. It was like 2018, but what their concerns are, and I do, agree to some extent, is a lot of these places on these lakes in particular are getting bigger and bigger. So if the town doesn't have any dog in the fight, if you will, and that at what point do they say, well, that's an acceptable setback, maybe it's 25 feet, or versus 5 feet, because they really don't have anything to justify their choice on. And then when, things change 25 years from now and everybody wants a paved road or a wider road, and if they go to approach the towns and say, hey, town, will you take over our road? And that the town's gonna, usually the town, the first things they say is, well, you don't have enough right away. Your buildings are too close. Well, you approve those buildings to be that close, so it kind of backs the town into a corner where then what do they do? So, and I'm not trying to advocate,
Like county zoning.
I'm not trying to advocate on this, like I said, and that I'm supportive of it as staff, but this is really coming from.
I think we
So-
gotta look, because I thought I read. Remember exactly what, that the town can't give that authority up. Towns can't give their authority to the county. To regulate certain things.
Well, town road, they would keep, but
Town
private,
roads-
and that,
Private is different,
and that
yeah.
private, they
Now that
would
it's a
keep.
private road.
That, so the reason why we changed this back then was because, I believe the BOA had made the statement that, why do we have all of these reduced town road setbacks coming before us? Why can't the towns, the people that are actually maintaining their road and stuff, weigh in on these and
Yes.
do it? So
Okay.
that was the change. And then I don't remember exactly how everything went down, but private road got added at the same time. So.
Well, they would the ones that have to take it over.
It's just me, Jason. Can you hear me?
I hear you, Brad.
So I agree with Chairman Luke. I think on private roads, I don't think the town should be having to say. I think the town doesn't plow it, doesn't do anything with it. So why would the town want the ability to say how close you can build a structure to it?
Right.
I agree too. Towns don't touch them.
But the county doesn't maintain it either. So.
So to give you an example, and that with this one with Lincoln, there's like 3 of them all going on this one road right now that we've been in talks with these people. Well, our ordinance right now is saying you got to go talk to the town for that reduced private road setback, or you can apply it to the BOA. You got 2 options. And that, well, then they're taking and delaying their project, going to the town. The town's like, county, why are you sending these to us? And that we don't want anything to do with them, so we're not gonna act. And that's what happened last Thursday night at the town of Lincoln. They just said, nope, we're not gonna act. And so now they gotta come back, they gotta do the whole applying process through the BOA through us. So that's kind of some of the issues that people are gonna run into too. And they're kind of frustrated because now they're, 2 months into it already, and we're telling them that it's gonna be another month and a half, so.
I just thought the towns wanted that local control. Now they don't. That's
But they still want to keep town roads, so, yep.
like they said, that if the county gives you a reduced setback, and they want the town to take it over, they come and say, okay, you gave them the reduced setback.
To the county, yeah,
Yeah, that the county, I don't know.
I think it's different.
Most of those aren't gonna ever be.
No, because especially those lake roads, because I'm thinking lake roads in my head. Town's never gonna take it over because they can't come in and plow it. They can't get in there. Heck, I can barely get in and out today.
I'm not, I guess. So this is something you'd have to add?
That would be an amendment that we would change, yep.
Okay.
So if you would wish to include that one, and so that's one of the changes. The other change in that, and Brad is online, but I talked to Supervisor Olson this morning about the transient lodge term, and we did talk about this at the February first meeting about just clarifying to make sure that tourist rooming house and transient lodge were the same. That's why I include both of those terms for you. There's no changes to the tourist rooming house, but the transient lodge now reads and that there will be 2 people per bedroom based on the sanitary or the number of bedrooms in the dwelling. So that clarification, whichever is more restrictive. So that was something that Supervisor Olson would like to make an amendment to, and we never formally amended that at the last meeting.
Do we, Brad and I were talking, do we need hours of operation though added to transient lodge to them?
And so that was another thing that he emailed me after I talked to him this morning about at any one time on the property. Because you'll realize that we have that up on the short-term rental, yeah, in that one. And so you could also insert, if you wanted to make that one better, I had sent those terms to them back on February 1st. But if you wanted to, you could go 9 to 12 people at any one time. And then if you wanted to, you could add quiet hours in there. But right now, a transient lodge would come to you guys as a conditional use, and you guys might impose other quiet hours that might be different than that. So it kind of leaves you as the committee more open if you don't put it in there.
Oh, because they need a CUP for that one.
Right. Yep.
Okay, what do you, Brad, are you listening?
Makes sense to me. Yep. Yeah, because transient lodge has to come for CUP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, yep. Yeah, I'm good with that. My main concern was getting the bedrooms in there, 2 people per bedroom.
Sure.
But under maximum occupancy, why does it have a range? Why doesn't it just say the max is 12,
Yeah.
like it does up above?
I think it was just trying to clarify and that the separation between a tourist rooming house permit and transient lodge. And that, so technically tourist rooming house says a maximum of 8, but if you go transient lodge, you know, what we don't want people to do is apply for a transient lodge as a CUP when they only have 6 people, because really then they're only a tourist rooming house permit. Whereas the transient lodge, and that if they have 9 or more, and that then they have to apply for the CUP.
Oh.
That was the
gotcha.
reasoning
They have
behind that.
9 or more. All right.
Yeah, 9 to
But in
12,
tourist rooming house, it says they can have a max of 12.
max of 12 and that on site. So that was back to what Supervisor Rowdy had
7
talked
and
about.
11, yeah.
Yep. And that, so if you have some family that want to
Yep,
come
yep.
over for the day, yep.
But they can, it says they can have sleeping accommodations are offered to pay for a maximum of 2 tourists per bedroom based on a sanitary system. So they could have a sanitary system and have 10 bedrooms, so they could have 20 people.
Oh, it says max of 8 and that there.
Oh, up to a total of 8.
Yep.
I didn't read for comprehension, sorry.
Yep.
Just help me out, sir. Did we change that from 2 per bedroom plus 2 down to 2 per bedroom?
Yeah, that was done in 2019.
Yeah,
That's
2
when we
per
changed it.
bedroom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought it was in the-
There is still some counties that do 2 per bedroom plus 2. That's one of the things in that health code rewrite committee wants to clarify. And from what I've heard, I think it's gonna go back down to 2 people per bedroom because it's based on sewer, which the administrative code for the sanitary says it's 2 people per bedroom. So,
I guess, I mean, that's fine. I just have always read it 2 plus.
you know,
Yeah.
I think we're gonna be right. I think if we changed it to plus 2, we'd end up changing it back probably next year. So.
Okay. All right, so this goes into both of these, doesn't it?
Yep.
Floodplain remove, shoreline and comp, this would go into a.
Goes into both. Yep.
Now, did we have any other changes in the comp you want to go through and then we have this?
Well, do you want to act on the shoreline one?
Do you want to add these? Do we need a motion, do we need consensus?
Well, do we have to do the same thing? Send it to the
Just make a
board?
motion and that to go to the full county board with recommendation and the inclusion of the 2 amendments handed out today from Supervisor Luke and Supervisor Olson. So,
These two, yeah,
Make
okay,
a motion to do that.
to both.
Yes,
Okay, to move to the county board with recommendation with the 2 amendments.
yep.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Tracy, okay. Favor, then say aye. Opposed? Okay. So then we're to the private onsite.
okay, if you want to jump to onsite
Let-
or do you want to do comprehensive?
We have to finish the comp because that sheet.
So as part of the comprehensive rewrite, we have to notify all the towns and that which we did via certified mail underneath the statute. The towns have not provided any objection to any of these amendments. And that's, so there's no need to extend it as far as the deadline goes. No other approvals needed from like DATCAP or DNR or anybody on these amendments, because we're not amending any of the floodplain, farmland preservation provisions. The same 6 poultry in the R1 zoning classification was changed. The adult establishment, and that was defined and was put as a CUP in the B1 commercial, general business, and the B2 recreational business commercial districts, which then also means that it's in B3. Those are all conditional uses. The same protections for those ag uses and the ag 1 and the ag 2 zoning classification were put in. And that if you guys adopt the amendments there, and that'd be the clarification on the private road setbacks being approved at the BOA, not at the town. Short-term mining was clarified, and the permit revocation process was simplified or clarified. So that's pretty much the same. The big change there is also the town of Sterling adopted county zoning at their January town board meeting. And so our ordinances are really 2 parts, if you think about them. One is the text, one is all the maps and stuff that are attached. So the amendment of the ordinance here would also include the town of Sterling's zoning map. Most of that property up there is town, county, or even federally owned. And so all those properties we put as natural resources N1. And then all the rest of the surrounding land is pretty much RA5, except for a few of the commercial businesses up there. We coded them accordingly. And then also we did a hamlet zoning strip, 330 feet from center line going north of Cushing along Highway 87 up to 250th Avenue, which is by that little lake that's along Highway 87 there. So, and that's all been approved by the town and that. So anyway, so that map is included as this amendment as well. The town of Sterling's, oh,
Technicality, I'm sitting here reading this and listening to Jason, and when you're talking about private road.
Yep.
So you've got us, we have a private road and it's 66 feet. And up to the cul-de-sac turnaround. We also have an access road of 30 feet that feeds another 5 cabins. Where does that fit in? If you had 35 feet setback from the center, you take up some of the 100-foot lots. I mean,
well,
is that?
Nope. I mean, on every property, the road setback eats up a certain amount of land, you know, but that's where the variance would come in. We don't term it a private road until there's more than 2 dwellings being served by that road. And once it becomes more than 2, that's when we assign a road name or number to it. And then the addresses are from that. And at that point, it becomes private road. So, but of course, there would still be the variance procedure that they could do through the BOA, like it used to be prior to 2018 or so. So. Yep.
You say, I won't worry about it, it isn't gonna affect me, but
Yeah, and that, the reason why it's 35 feet and that, and you brought up a good case in that, because that road coming in 66 foot wide. So the 35 foot is designed to basically have a 2-foot eave, you know, and that if somebody forgets to measure the eave, but yet still have the building completely outside of the road 66 foot for the road right away if the town ever takes it over. So that we don't have buildings getting built on the town road right away in the future if the town takes it over. So.
and I got that part, but I'm talking about the 30-foot access road. It's still a private road. It's only 30 feet.
Right.
Take it.
So we take
You know,
35 feet from the center.
Yeah,
That's a lot of property,
that's right.
and then you gotta come in here.
Well, you have
for-
15 feet in the easement and then 20 feet into the property that you'd be, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So you take 100-foot by 300-foot lot, that's a big chunk of it. I mean, if you're trying to fit everything in there,
In there, yeah. Or if you got any slopes or anything, yeah.
well,
it's
we
tight.
lose a quarter of it
Yeah.
or more.
Yeah, 'cause there was a lot of, some of these lakes had 3 foot.
And
But
then
we
they
just
gotta
do
come
it
in here and
and
pay
ask for permission later.
$750 to get a variance.
yeah, well, the problem is, you know, too, and that, and this is the kind of the issue that a lot of these towns have been looking at is it depends on where the garage doors are also located. You know, if it's a side entry, you know, it's not so bad, but if the garage doors are facing the road, you know, and then all of a sudden you park a 4-door pickup in that with a normal box in front of it, you know, it's not very far off the road. And like you say that they're lake properties. So now all of a sudden they've got their boat trailer because the boat's in the water sitting in front of the garage, or they've got the boat on the trailer sitting in front of the garage. And so now it gets to be very narrow around those private drives, you know, if you shorten them up too much. So.
A lot of it's the fire trucks and all that have to have so much room and
I
stuff
understand
to
that.
get down.
Yeah.
Start doing 0 setbacks on both sides. That gets pretty tight going in there.
Yeah. And some of them we've got are,
Not against a setback. At 30 feet. It's just it's having 35 feet on a 30-foot. Seems quite
Yeah.
extensive. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's why we used to be at the town, so they could just exempt you and say, yeah, put it 10 feet.
Right.
See, that's why I said it should have stayed at the town. So you wouldn't have to come in and pay for that. Now you gotta come back in and pay it and went
Pay
backwards.
$750.
Yep. Backwards, see, I knew somebody would catch it.
no good thing about the BOA is, you know, that they're not political, you know, and that's what takes some of that pressure off from your local town officials, you know, and puts it on the BOA. And also, that the BOA has, of course, the ability to assign conditions on them, you know, pretty easily. So they can make them side entrance if they want to be closer to the center of the road to offset some of that, because I mean, it never fails. I mean, you take and all of a sudden got a garage closer, now there's a flower bed going around it, or now there's a split rail fence, you know, that look nice, you know, or a landscaping wall, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, somebody comes through and plows it, and then they're mad at, you know, whoever approved them, you know, to do it. You shouldn't have let me do it, you know, so,
Oh, hits the building, it's too close.
or the snow hits the building, you know, so, you know.
Deer Lake, they get hit once in a while. The buildings, they're right on top of them.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I mean, there's 3-foot setback with a 2-foot eve.
Yeah.
Guys are putting bollards in to bounce off.
Yeah.
We just have cars in our way. We just fill them full.
Okay. So those, we moved forward. So we're down to the,
Okay,
she moved, yeah, with that, that'll move forward.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
So then our sanitary ordinance, this one does require to be reviewed and approved by the Department of Safety and Professional Services. Katie Petzel is our plan reviewer, field specialist for our area, so she's the one that would sign off on that. We did send out those changes to Katie. She has given us preliminary approval on that. The changes that are affected in that ordinance are that we now have county agent status to review mounds and at grades and pressure systems. So we changed some text for that. We clearly define that a tourist roaming house or a short-term rental would require commercial state sanitary plans if they needed to be replaced, and that we can't do it in that on an existing system, but a new system, they'll have to get state plans. So in other words, the state is called the shot on that one. They're saying that a short-term rental is a commercial use, and that's why it needs commercial plan review.
Good, we're getting closer to.
Yeah,
And that,
seeing the lights.
Yeah,
Yep. We also added a provision in there that, you know, it should be done anyway, but it says that the soil test must be completed and submitted upon payment, you know, and that to the county. That way the soil test can be, you know, given out to other plumbers and that for bids. So the property owner should have that if they pay for it, so. We had to make some changes to the maintenance program wording and that because in 2020, we adopted the Ascent program. So now all of our maintenance is handled through there. So the pumpers file the reporting online so that we don't have to sit there and manually enter them anymore. So I had to change some of that text. And then we clarified what the soil tested area was. And then basically the system has to be within 15 feet of a boring because that's a big gray area in the ordinance right now is how close can I or how close do I have to be to a boring to put in this new system? And so we clarified that to be 15 feet, which is relatively 1/4 of the length of a 3-bedroom system. So it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but it is pretty reasonable. So.
so should I make a motion on that one?
Yes,
Okay, I'll make a motion, we move, we're all okay with this, right?
yes.
I make a motion, we move this with a recommendation to the board.
Need a second. Second from Doug. Any questions? If not, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? That one. Goes. So floodplain, shore, and private could be under the consent agenda, I would think.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think those would go in the Stefan one.
Is he not doing something today with the addressing thing?
And that the addressing one, and that will still be at the March County Board if the Public Safety, Public Works Committee approves it in March. So that goes to their committee. So,
Okay,
you know,
because I know we got the notice as clerks, but I was like.
Yep.
is this on this one? And I'm-
So that's, I think it's March 7th is when they're having their meeting. And so it'll be on the county board if they adopt it. So
One more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What happened to the Pipe Lake Tourist Terminal?
and that application was withdrawn. You know, and that, so there was a bunch of neighbors that reached out to us, and then the neighbors reached out to the applicants. And basically, the applicant says, you know, we don't want to be bad neighbors, we're gonna take and withdraw. And if we do a short-term rental, we're just gonna apply for the general permit underneath a tourist rooming house, not a transient lodge. So,
It was in the paper, so I.
yep, yeah, it was already sent off to the paper and everybody was notified, but yeah. So then just to clarify, exhibit 9, I'd like to take and make the handout here with the 2 changes from Supervisor Luke and Supervisor Olson.
Okay, as exhibit 9.
Exhibit 9, yep.
Now, do you have copies of these other ones, Jason?
Nope, I need to get 6 and 7 from you.
Yeah, we can keep them. Those will all be copied. Do you want this whole set? I don't think, I think if you have here, have 1, 2, I have all of them right together. I got it. You have, okay. So that will be coming back anyway,
Okay.
when we go through that one. Yeah, so I won't need copies because we'll be going through it. Okay,
Need to close the public hearing?
we can close the public hearing. At 2 minutes to 12. Okay. We're down to.
So these,
agenda number
yeah.
10.
yeah, so Chairman O'Connell, just for clarification, so these amendments to the floodplain, shoreline, and comprehensive and private outs ordinance will be recommended to the full county board on the March 21st meeting.
The- Yes.
Okay.
Yes, those, I think all 4 ordinances will go through. I think,
You mentioned the consent agenda. Is that your recommendation or?
that would be a
We usually do
recommendation
that, don't
because
we?
I'm okay with that if it's legal to.
I think it is, because they have questions, they should be here, shouldn't they?
To put the
Those ordinances on
On the
the.
consent agenda. It's all the
I think
public
that's
hearings
what
and
we
stuff.
always do it now.
It's a business meeting when we have it. Hold on. Never said that. Yeah. So the Stefan one will be on there too.
True,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that one
all
as
those.
well. Yep.
I think otherwise. It's a 6-hour meeting.
Right. We introduce.
Yeah, we're
It's a
used to a
business
half
meeting.
an hour now.
It's a
We're
business
down to a half
meeting.
an hour.
If Malia disagrees with me, she can tell Vincent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I think we're good.
I think so. I think we should, because that's why we have this right now.
Well, that's where they usually are.
Well, that's a recent development. Historically, we've had ordinances outside of the consent agenda. It is an ordinance change.
Right.
But I'm just getting clarification and then there's another purpose. Yeah, I just want to know whether or not, we need to invite Jason in the event to that county board meeting in the event there are questions.
Unless we pull it out. That's why that's why we have these meetings right now. I mean, if it's highly contentious, we should have had a room full.
Well, any board member can asked to remove it from the consent agenda
Yeah.
and put onto the regular agenda. So if they have any argument or amendments that they want to make, it can always get pulled off.
That didn't go over well the last time, because Health and Human Services, when she pulled that one off, they wanted to have another public debate on it.
Yeah.
I mean, half the place went wild and the other half didn't, but it's, that's why, I mean, Russ says, we're here as a business meeting. If you want to know what's going on, you have to go to some of these meetings.
Right.
Make your voice known if you want all these changes. You know, wait to the 11th hour and say, oh, I want to change everything. I mean, that's kind of why we have the committee system and stuff to make that a business meeting is what I feel.
Thank you. I just need that clarification.
I think they should. I don't know why they don't put it that way. I mean, otherwise you're gonna sit for half an hour, and read all that in front of everybody, and what are they gonna ask? I mean, look what it took today. I mean,
Well, that county board meeting in March will have a lot of products from your work because you have been meeting here in
Yeah.
February, so. And there's opportunity to come to these hearings, so you're correct.
yes, I think that's a lot of it right there, that if, I mean, our board meetings would be getting pretty long if you had to sit and explain every one of these ordinances to them.
So Chairman O'Connell, do you want to go on to number 10 then, or is it, excuse me, yep, number 10. Like I mentioned earlier, forgive me for being late. Mike Gilder from SEH will be here to present the 100% design. So that's on the March 1st agenda. As I mentioned before, I have already placed that in the folder for your packet, so you will have those site plans. Updated parks and trails, perhaps Mo might have something to offer, so I'll pencil that in. We do have a CUP in the town of Lincoln, boarding kennel.
Land and Water, does Eric want to give us, does he want to read through it to us?
Well, I can.
I'm just wondering. I mean, the rest, all the other ones kind of went through it a little bit.
Sure. I can do it now that I'm here, or we can punt till March 1st.
Yeah, I just thought it looks like we didn't do it if we just skipped it, so I'm just saying.
Would you like for me to do it now? Okay. Well, I do believe the CUP for the boarding kennel in town of Lincoln, there's going to be some folks here for that, I would assume.
I think so too.
Mhm.
I didn't see 1,000 foot anywhere.
So, and we have that. I can give a divisional report. Oh, sorry. And then you asked about the closed session for to discuss substantial completion.
Yes, I think we should to move that on for them, because I think that,
But Jason and staff will forward a review of ordinance 10, or at least renewable energy ordinance for the 15th, correct?
yeah.
So we have roughly a month to provide some
to go through it again,
recommendations.
kind of.
Yeah, we all took notes. We have some different perspective on what you heard through the testimony today, so I think,
Well, it was one-sided, of
Mhm.
course.
so I think, well, I'm confident Jason will provide some good recommendations. We could talk that through on the 15th, but yeah, we'll add the closed session on the 1st and talk about the definition of substantial completion.
Yeah. And then the
That
Blue Rock
means-
update, maybe, if we have a question, something might come to it. And then, of course, the other trail one, we don't even ask for anymore. That is just unbelievable. But we'll leave that one alone.
So that's it, Chairman O'Connell. Again, just a quick review, presentation on the ATV UTV intensive park. Perhaps Mo, the CUP for the dog kennel in Lincoln, the closed session. And anything
So
else
should we
that
move the public
emerges?
Hearing up there, instead of putting it at 9, do we move it up? Or do we try to do everything in the first half hour and do that public hearing would be the last?
It's already in the news, I think.
At
Uh-huh.
9:30?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
well,
You could put a bunch of that stuff up front there.
true. Well, the presentation might take half an hour on the intensive part. I have them on the front of the agenda,
Oh, sure.
so that might take a half an hour.
Yeah, unless there's public comment ahead, but then otherwise, yeah. So we might be all right. Yeah, I think we're all right.
And you never know what might emerge between now and then. That'll be put on the agenda.
Okay.
Sharon is gone.
She's gone.
Sharon's gone.
Oh,
Nobody
guess
can
we
do it.
gotta stay here then.
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Doug, okay, all those in favor say aye. We're adjourned.